the strongest support of the Fourth Hokage. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 153, The Little Ghost's Mission. No. No way, Obito stared at Minato-sensei in disbelief. Of course, if he could help it, he wouldn't believe what little son-sensei had just said. They were actually going to split up. This was unrealistic. How could just a few of them create unrest within the land of wind as bait? That was one of the legendary 5 great nations. Even if the main force had been dispatched, there would always be reserves left behind. At this point, just the 3 of them would be courting death. Minato-sensei, there's no way we can do that. Obito trembled as he grasped the hem of Minato's shirt. They were no longer rookies. Having witnessed the brutality of the battlefield, they understood that ninjas of their caliber survived only because of Minato's presence. Without this powerful helper, far superior to the average Kage, they wouldn't have been able to withstand even the first round of attacks. They were just children. Even a genius would still tremble and feel a surge of emotion when seeing blood for the first time. A large hand rested on his trembling small one. A power far surpassing chakra, carrying the scent of sunshine, was channeled into Obito's body. Masahiro would likely never have been able to achieve this. It was precisely for this reason that, in his mind, Minato, with his powerful appeal, was the most suitable candidate for Hokage. Never underestimate your enemy, it's a precious quality for a ninja. He didn't mean to blame little Obito. They were just children, not even 10 years old. For them, having to go to the battlefield at such a young age was already the greatest misfortune. But, since they had chosen to become ninja, there were things Minato had to teach them. He gently patted Obito's head. Just remember, Obito, Minato responded to his fear with a warm smile. If you only deny yourself, you will never rise higher. Minato turned to look at Kakashi and Rin, who also wore solemn expressions. War never deviates or shifts because of one person. His gaze drifted into the distance, where he and Masahiro had experienced everything. So, in this war, I will draw the enemy's primary attention. In other words, your lives are completely in my hands. His voice gradually rose from a low voice. But equally, if you fail to complete your mission, sooner or later I will disappear in the ongoing battle. I, too, entrust my life to you. Obito felt a hand holding his, gently exerting force. He began to understand that unknown power. It's called trust. This well-trained team welcomed a new member today. Unlike the others, who were all dressed in black, this young man, still clad in his tight green training suit, followed behind Shinayu with a determined gaze, even as his legs trembled slightly. His teacher was his guiding light. But this mission, Shinayu, having entered the battlefield early, hadn't clashed with the Sans shinobi. Instead, he used the power of wood release to advance stealthily. Today, the 4 of them had already reached the vicinity of the Sans shinobi village. They had surpassed the entire Sans shinobi front. This meant that if they were exposed, they would undoubtedly face a double team from both sides. This was no mere rhetoric. Even a Kage-level figure would eventually meet his end in this endless war. Every move they made was a dance on a tightrope, but Master Shinayu went about his tasks as if discussing his breakfast. The other root members, as usual, listened in silence and drifted off. No one seemed concerned about this madcap plan. They would set up a complex series of seals right under the noses of the Sans village. Those strange symbols, likely representing some kind of sealing technique, were Shinayu's ultimate goal. All while doing so, they needed to avoid detection. If that wasn't possible, they would have to annihilate any Sans ninja they encountered immediately. The 5 of them split into 2 teams, Shinayu and Guy on one, and the remaining 3 on the other. The operation began. Because setting the seals required extreme chakra control, Shinayu had to do it himself. His protection during this time would be his apprentice, Might Guy, a young brat whose strength was at most that of a chunin. As a Konoha ninja, Guy was known for risking his life, but this time, it wasn't just his own life, but also that of his teacher. Shinayu's safety was in his hands. So, he was afraid of the fragility of life. People die only when they need to. Shin'Aon couldn't offer his disciple any comfort with a smile like Minato did. He could only use his own way. And for me, that time is still far too early. Chapter 154, Full Strength. Shukaku. Fleeing into the distance, Minato returned to the tree where he had stood before. Opposite him, the once stern woman had completely transformed. A scarlet chakra sheath now enveloped her body, and the ominous aura on the tail jutting out from behind confirmed that this was the Sans Village's Jinchuriki. You have no chance of winning. Gilai stood beside Garuda, his palm resting on the ground, not even looking up. Even if it's really Konoha White Fang, he can't take on a cage-level warrior and another Jinchuriki alone. Surrender. Silently, Minato's expression grew serious, but it was clear he had no intention of heeding the other's advice. He pulled a special kunai from his ninja tool bag. More like a small trident, it was heavier than a regular kunai. For an ordinary person, wielding it would be a little unfamiliar. But anyone who had witnessed its power would instantly want to flee. From now on, Namikaze Minato was unleashing his full strength, the dividing line of the mopping up forces. Stop him. From here on, never. In the combat meeting 10 minutes ago, the frontline commander who had just been elected died just like that. What took his life was a uniquely crafted kunai. Of course, they did not see the entire process of the enemy's attack. At most, they could only feel the rapidly passing gust of wind and the dazzling golden flash. Nothing is known, and there is no way to determine his next move. The cowards don't know where to hide, and the brave don't know where to charge. The god of death on the battlefield, the most powerful and terrifying ninja, he brings death to every ninja standing across from him equally, a stab to the heart 3 inches from the armpit, a glance that cuts the throat, or even an invitation to death sent between the eyebrows. Trembling, brave, strong, weak, all enemies can't even withstand a single blow in front of him. The Sand Shinobi are afraid. It's better to say that they were afraid 10 years ago. The god of death who once brought endless disasters to the Sans Shinobi village, the demon whose name alone was enough to make any Sans Shinobi give up their mission, the short sword held upside down is stained with blood, the silver hair and black eyes are the murderous intent that belongs only to that man. Hatake Tsukumo. 10 years ago, that man was just like now, almost single-handedly toying with the entire Wind Kingdom in the palm of his hand. Lightning speed, a fleeting flash of light. This fear, inherited in the blood, finally left the altar of legend today. He actually appeared on the battlefield, and he truly brought the hatred and fear passed down from the previous generation to every dead soul who died with lingering eyes. The rout began. An unstoppable rout. The endless mountains and forests of the Fire Country became the perfect hunting ground. Due to the limitations of the environment, no matter how many people there were, they could not escape the pursuit of that man. No hesitation. No hesitation. Perhaps a moment of looking back to confirm the distance would become the last glance back. People could only pray that the god of death was not chasing them, but in fact, there was no way to deal with the god of death. They were like blind lemmings, madly fleeing towards the kingdom of wind. Ninjutsu, ninja tools, they terrifiedly cut down huge trees one after another to gain a more convenient passage for themselves, even though such an approach was actually meaningless. The shadow of death began to hang over the heads of the Sans Shinobi. All this was finally curbed until the footsteps that went against the direction of the crowd appeared. Dang, a direct and crisp collision sound. And it was not until this sound was rang out that the panicked invaders saw for the first time the true appearance of the god of death who had been chasing after them. It was a young man of about 20 years old, with a head of golden hair, and the special kunai in his hand, stained with countless blood, was firmly held by a short knife. That was Gilai. Lord Kazekage is here. After 2 days, did he finally catch up? The fourth Kazekage. Minato's eyes finally gleamed with a glint. The few elite Jonin in the battle had already surrendered, and the one succeeding the third as Kazekage was surprisingly young, roughly the same age as himself and Mayu. The Sand Shinobi, now on the brink of collapse, had found their first opportunity to strike back. And this posed a grave danger for Minato. A ninja who relied on speed to inflict damage feared nothing more than being drawn into a positional battle. He couldn't truly wipe out an entire Sans Shinobi frontline, but through his momentum and the terrain, he could leverage his advantages to crush them. If the Sans Shinobi could completely surround him within a certain radius, that couldn't happen. Therefore, Minato raised his kunai, glaring sternly at the young man before him. He had to defeat him as quickly as possible. The Hatake Ryu's bodybuilding techniques had long been refined to their limits through the efforts of Minato and Mayu, and now, Minato had decided to give it a new name, Mikujyu Ryu, Thunderbolt. Chakra flow was pushed to its limit. In the blink of an eye, Minato's body was actually surrounded by a hazy golden glow. Kyune gripped horizontally, and then, taking a half step back with his left foot, Minato, caught on that oppressive air strike, was like a powerful bow about to be released. Going to fire. P.S. A counterattack against a top student. Although it was only for a brief moment. Hey, let's add another chapter. Recommend. Reward. Chapter 155, The Blooming Lotus. Let's jump forward a bit. Just as Shinayu's letter arrived at the Sand Village, just as the Fourth Hokage led his guards to the front lines for support, and as Chihayo gazed at the battlefield beyond her sight, no one could have imagined that, just a stone's throw away, Shinayu, the man who had just boasted, had already reached the very edge of the Sand Shinobi's lair. Was the massive Sand Shinobi army facing them more formidable, or were the remaining forces entrenched in the village more formidable? Shinayu answered the question without hesitation. Beyond the aura of the Senju clan, Shinayu's mother was a true Uzumaki noble. Those strange and powerful sealing techniques were a piece of cake for Shinayu. The five-man team began their operation early. Within the impenetrable cliffs of the Sand Village, a hidden conspiracy was brewing. As rune after rune was carved, the war would be brought to a glorious and bloody conclusion by the hidden hand. If everything goes according to plan. Teacher, calm down. Less than 50 meters from where Shinayu had placed the rune, a standard Sans ninja patrol was conducting a routine inspection. The rune's engraving had already begun, and Shinayu couldn't cut off the chakra supply, lest a backlash from the rune severely damage the caster. It could be said that Shinayu was completely powerless right now. If discovered, a standard team of 1 Jonin and 3 Jinan would be beyond Kai's ability to handle. His breathing practically stopped at that moment. Kai's palms were already clenched in a cold sweat. Teacher, the enemy hadn't noticed them yet, perhaps because they weren't already in the village and didn't have any sensory ninjas? Even so, judging by their direction of movement, they would definitely find this place in less than 10 seconds. And Shinayu's engraving was only halfway done. Calm down. Shinayu's voice was soft, yet held a strange, magical power that made him obey his instructions subconsciously. Perhaps it was because he had experienced too many life or death situations? For Shinayu, fighting and survival had long become instincts. He couldn't spare the energy to pat Kai's head to sober him up. All he could do was use his voice to urge this rookie on the battlefield to make the right decision. Calm down. Perhaps Shinayu's words had truly worked. Kai, who had almost launched a preemptive strike, retreated into hiding and waited silently, staying by Shinayu's side. Even without paying close attention, Shinayu could sense the churning of his chakra. In the face of such a life-or-death struggle, no one is born with a strong heart, except perhaps for Shinayu, a pervert who'd been playing with the world from the start. But for any normal person, this sudden heartbeat is unavoidable. This is the great fear of death, and no one is immune. Getting closer and closer. For a ninja, the opponent's speed of movement was already considered slow, but for Kai at this moment, he definitely didn't mind if the enemy stopped immediately and set up camp. But this was just a fantasy after all. A blood-stained battle would soon come. Don't think about anything, Xianyang's voice sounded again. This time, his voice was softer, as if it was just a whisper in the ear. After hearing my instructions, immediately attack the 3 Jinan who fell behind. There is no need to rush to defeat the enemy with one move, just to make them temporarily lose their ability to move is enough. Kai did not look back, he had completely entered the rhythm of the battle, only his body's instinct was still receiving instructions from Xianyang. Then, you will have the opportunity to face the opponent's Jonin, delay him for 1 minute, 1 minute is enough, 1 minute, 1 minute. Guy was now merely a rookie, newly minted Jinan. Even before receiving Shinayu's guidance, he wasn't sure he could defeat his peers. But now, the brutality of war had brought him before the Jonin of the Wind Country. He didn't fear death, but he feared disappointing the man behind him. Coming closer. Guy heard the whispers, the breathing clearly. Now, the command finally arrived, and his body, already brimming with power and reaching its peak, instantly leaped forth. The jet-like acceleration made the very earth tremble slightly. The recoil from the sand wasn't as strong as on hard ground, but for Guy at that moment, it was more than enough. A Konoha whirlwind. The opponent's reaction speed was also commendable, almost instantly defending himself as Guy attacked. However, the fighting instinct hidden within the young man controlled his attack like a thin layer of skin. Before the opponent could react, before Guy even realized it, his smooth attack had already reached its target. 1. 2. A sudden, powerful kick instantly knocked down two Jinan in the opposing formation. Only the last one, thanks to the angle, escaped death by using the body of a sand ninja Jonin. The initiative, lost. Standing still, Kai unhesitatingly released his fighting stance. He firmly placed himself between the opponent and Shinayu. 50 seconds, Shinayu shouted, his eyes unflinchingly nervous, instead a gleam of admiration for the young man's performance. 50 seconds. I can do it. Sitting still and waiting for death wasn't Kai's style. With two opponents, if he focused on breaking through his blockade, he would inevitably be at a disadvantage. Instead of that, it was better to take the initiative. Lunge forward. Facing the terrifying pressure from the opponent's Jonin, Kai's entire body was like an arrow from a bow, and with just half a step, he accelerated to terrifying speed. A spring kick. A straightforward, frontal attack. If it were just a Chunin, this single move would likely have neutralized the opponent, rendering him powerless. But Guy's opponent was, after all, a Jonin. He hurled two shurikens at lightning speed, while simultaneously, a sharp kunai blocked the path of his kick. Counterattack? No. If that were all, it would be a disservice to Shinayu's teachings. With a sudden thrust of force from his left leg, Guy's entire body, almost on the verge of soaring into the air, twisted and lunged towards the opponent's refuge. Just a hair's breadth away. The attack had never been aimed at the Jonin from the start. After all, no matter how much he considered it, a Jonin couldn't be defeated so easily. To break the 1 versus 2 deadlock, he had to first eliminate the last remaining Jinan. Konoha, Bad Rock Rising. The exact same move he'd used against Kakashi, but now, it unleashed an entirely different level of destructive power. Though not heavily infused with chakra, this perfect strike, both in speed and power, easily pinned the Jinan into the sand. The third one. Finally, a one-on-one moment. But for the mission as a whole, Shinayu's team seemed to be in dire straits. How could the Jounin be so easily fooled? It wasn't so much that Guy's powerful attack had achieved the expected result, but rather that the Sans Shinobi Jounin had instantly determined that Shinayu, maintaining his special formation, was the true focal point between the two. The deadly kunai was nearly touching Shinayu's head. Yet, Shinayu, still maintaining his chakra output, seemed oblivious. His signature mocking smile still lingered. Stupid? No, Shinayu didn't think so. Bang! The powerful impact struck before the opponent's attack even reached Shinayu. It was a kick identical to the previous one, the only difference being that this one carried far more terrifying speed and power. The terrifying destructive force ripped through the Jonin's kidneys and liver almost instantly upon impact, and as he sped backward, he saw only a blurry blue figure at the end of his life. The chakra flow, entirely materialized from chakra, swirled wildly around the young man's body. His crimson complexion and bulging veins indirectly depicted the power of this move. It was a proud and unruly blue beast, the Konoha lotus blossoming upon the battlefield. Chapter 156, Intensifying. Hiss, the bodies of the sand ninja were simply piled aside. Shinayu, having already completed the rune engraving, smiled as he healed his prized student. After all, he was still just a child, and the 8 gates of ninjutsu placed a tremendous strain on Kai. A mere medical ninja would likely be powerless against the complex damage to his meridians. His ninja career would likely be over. Fortunately, Shinayu possessed a far more formidable life force. Direct reconstruction was far faster and easier than healing. Anyway, to be able to accomplish this at his age was already a source of immense satisfaction for Shinayu. While Kai's use of the 8 gates was exceptionally smooth, and even more impressive than Shinayu had anticipated, his mastery of the 8 gates of ninjutsu was, of course, a greater test of his physical endurance. In reality, this was more of a test. It wasn't that he lacked confidence in his apprentice, but Shinayu had never been accustomed to risking his life on a single plan. Due to his wood-release physique, even if the Sans Shinobi Jonin truly managed to land a kunai on him, his chakra would be completely devoured by Shinayu in the next instant. It's no exaggeration to say that the name Senju Shinayu is now practically synonymous with a humanoid-tailed beast, and this was precisely why he had loudly reminded Guy of the remaining time. From the very beginning, Shinao had intended to lure the Jonin to his side. The healing didn't last long. Including the rune he had just placed, only one remained. Judging by the timeline, the other team's mission would be complete in 20 minutes at most. Now came the final moment. If the plan went smoothly, this operation would be the crucial deciding factor in the standoff with the Sans Shinobi. However, Shinao and his team were already exposed. As previously explained, there was only one rune left. When it came to sealing techniques, missing one or two runes didn't mean a loss of power. If all the runes couldn't be engraved, the sealing technique would be impossible to activate. But judging by the current situation, after noticing the disappearance of this reconnaissance team, the enemy's next group of pursuers should arrive very soon. This period of time is definitely not enough for Jinayong to set up the last place. Should he give up here? No, if that were the case, everything he had done before would be meaningless. Moreover, before taking action, Jinayong had already considered the possibility of being discovered. Kai, can you move? Jinayong patted his disciple's shoulder. Yes, yes. Teacher Jinayong. Obviously, the sudden encounter just now not only gave Kai his first heart-wrenching feeling in war, but also made him gradually grow up through hardships. And now, he is just like Jinayong back then. He has just tasted the huge strength improvement brought by the battlefield, his blood boiling, and he can't wait for the next fight. Don't be impatient, Jinayong smiled and shook his head. Then, he handed the piece of broken wood in his palm to Kai. This time, I need you to arrange the last rune. Although his blood was boiling, Kai still retained the minimum attempt of a ninja. According to his current poor chakra control ability, it is absolutely impossible for him to complete such a complicated engraving. The extremely efficient chakra fighting technique he used was nothing more than muscle memory brought about by thousands of times of practice. But, teacher, Jinayong pressed his shoulder, signaling him not to be anxious. I understand. This is a technique I developed myself. As long as you provide chakra, this thing will automatically guide it to form the previously determined configuration. Although it will take a longer time. But as long as you don't interrupt the output of chakra, there should be no problem. So that's how it is. Remember, this time, you must complete this task alone. Then teacher, as for me, Jinayong turned around, and the corners of his mouth raised that iconic smile again, a disgusting and terrifying smile. He moved his wrist. Of course I'm waiting for guests here. The dividing line at the last moment, in the endless yellow sand, two elite teams wearing Sans Shinobi Ford protectors are moving forward rapidly. Just now, a patrol team suddenly lost contact very close to the village. Now is wartime. If it is really because of the enemy, then it may mean that the enemy is very likely to launch a surprise attack on the Sans Shinobi village. Faced with such a special situation, two special affairs handling teams composed entirely of Sans Shinobi elite ambush set off almost at the same time as they heard the news. 10 minutes at the most, they finally arrived at the scene. Having carried out secret missions for years, they were very skilled at both tracking and counter-tracking. Furthermore, as elites, they either received special training or were born with a special skill in these areas. No matter who they targeted, they would eventually be firmly pinned down. However, this time, their talents were destined to have no room to flourish. Yo, good morning, everyone. The man sat there with a smile, even extending his right hand to greet them warmly. You guys got here so quickly. As he spoke, his eyes narrowed into slits, making it impossible to guess his true expression. The silence lasted less than half a second before the Sand Ninjas launched their attack without hesitation. Earth style, earth-splitting palm. Wind style, great breakthrough. The arrivals were at least Jonin, and having mastered the transformation of chakra properties, the ninjutsu they unleashed was naturally powerful. However, standing in their way was a terrifying chasm. Are you guys so eager? Jinayong shook his head jokingly, sitting there motionless. The only thing he did was push his right palm against the ground. Boom! Huge trees appeared out of thin air. The fear that once existed only in the depths of memory was finally unleashed at this moment. Wood release. That's wood release. Are you guys so eager to die? Today's two updates are very substantial and full of sincerity. Everyone, please don't be careless and hand in your recommendation votes. Chapter 157, The Real Goal. Are you so eager to die? Shinao's voice was emotionless. No, his voice was completely different from that of Minato, known as the Little Sun. Though they were equally powerful on the battlefield, if Minato commanded respect from his enemies, Shinao instilled endless disgust. and a fear that completely masked that disgust, that teasing, that naked contempt. Would release, Sword Mountain Forest. There was no need for hand seals anymore. A mere ninjutsu of this level, a mere Fujinin, was no longer a concern for Shinayu now. 10 years ago, on this very land, a single elite Jonin, Tsuchita, had nearly pushed him into the abyss of despair. And now, it was time to pay his debt. After today, after this battle, the name Senju Shinayu would become the Wind Country's deepest nightmare. Boom. Gigantic trees appeared out of thin air. The fear that had once existed only in the depths of his memory was finally unleashed at this moment. In the distant past, there was also a ninja like this. He almost single-handedly quelled all the riots in the Land of Wind. In the Land of Wind, where hot winds and burning currents were rampant, that ninja used his own hands to create vast, endless forests in the blink of an eye. Gloomy dark green covered the sky, and scarlet blood was spilled wantonly. Even the most powerful ninja could not escape his presence. They fled trembling, not even caring about the people behind them. They huddled together frantically, trying to get a little comfort from their companions. But they ultimately failed. The vast army of ninjas, the indestructible and powerful ninjutsu, everything seemed like a mirage in front of the rampaging trees. In the blink of an eye, they returned to dust. The weak people surrendered, but the deepest sense of shame in their hearts made them destroy all records, and the comfortable players played the role of vassal states. Now, only the name of that ninjutsu remained, passed down among them by word of mouth. Xianyang stood up, and under his control, the huge tree sent him to a height where he could almost overlook the entire sand village. Here, he seemed like a god of this world. Whether they were traitors or perpetrators, today, let them remember again. About that ninja legend, about that strongest myth, the original name. Would release, Xianyang opened his hands and shouted out the name of this move in a rare loud voice. With the help of chakra, the loud voice quickly spread to every corner of the sand village. The tree world descends, the miracle reappears. It was as if it was the legendary Doomsday Judgment Day. The narrow terrain could not provide any protection for the sand's shinobi. The giant trees that blocked out the sun swallowed up the walls and sentry posts in the blink of an eye. He was like a tireless beast. Those terrible tentacles had stretched into the interior of the village in the shortest time. No matter whether they were ninjas or civilians, everyone stopped. Weapons were thrown aside powerlessly. In the face of this natural disaster, the power of mankind seemed so small, so insignificant. So, the gloomy dark green color once again covered the sky, and scarlet blood was once again spilled wantonly. And under the desperate gaze of everyone, in the Kazakage building, dozens of vague figures followed Shinayu and stepped onto the battlefield. I didn't expect to see such a scene in my lifetime, an old voice sounded. It's just like Tsukima back then, now is not the time to chat. Ebizo ended the conversation. We must stop this thing before it causes more damage. How to? The old man shook his head helplessly. We have to give it a try. Shinayu stood in front of everyone else. This group of white-haired elders was the last barrier of the Wind Country. Let's go. Incredible speed, the afterimage in his pupils had barely faded before the tens of meters between them were instantly closed. Fast. By the time Gai caught sight of the other man again, the deadly kunai had nearly pierced his chest. Puff. Chi, a series of collisions echoed. Behind the fourth Kazakage, another woman managed to temporarily push Minato away at the last moment, Garuda. Even so, if Gai hadn't managed to summon the sand armor at the last moment, he would have been slain by the other man's blade by now. That strike just now was incredibly fast. Compared to the speed he'd initially displayed, it was even a level higher. Gai hadn't seen the real White Fang of Konoha, but one thing was certain, the man before him was no mere imitation of White Fang, but a supreme combat power no less powerful than White Fang himself. The enemy was strong, even stronger than his worst expectations, but that wasn't a reason to give up. Magnetic release, gold dust. The techniques inherited from the Sand Dame were now displayed in Gai's hands with equal prowess. The terrain shifted in the blink of an eye, and the golden quicksand severely restricted everyone's movement. Indeed, to defeat a ninja who relies on speed, the only way to defeat him is to deprive him of his sharpest weapon. Beneath his feet lay the impassable quicksand. Only in this situation would Gai have time to strike back. Garuda, now was no time to hold back. Understood, a cold reply came. The female ninja who had suddenly appeared from nowhere also clenched her hands. Sandstorm burial, the tide had turned. In a battle between cage-level warriors, a moment of slack could cost one's life. And Minato, nearly mired in the quicksand, was now in dire straits? No, not yet. The golden light grew more restrained. Once again, that terrifying energy fully returned to Minato's body. Any new moves? Bang! Unlike the previous swift and silent attacks, this time, the moment Minato launched his attack, the previously calm sands erupted into a torrent of sand. It was still a frontal attack. But this time, Gilai wore a victorious smile. Sacrificing speed for even greater destructive power? That was completely meaningless. Garuda gave a light touch, and with the two of them working together, they almost simultaneously leaped backwards with a force. With just that level of speed, they had plenty of time to react. And Minato, left standing, was swallowed up by countless quicksands in the blink of an eye. The outcome was decided. Surrounded by a complete lack of blind spots, no one could escape, unless... Bang! A heavy blow directly struck the woman behind. That's right, there was no trace, no sign. Surrounded by a complete lack of blind spots, no one could escape, unless he could directly move across space. That careless touch was Konoha's golden flash, the mark of death left on the enemy. 3 updates today. Please vote, please reward. Please save your chrysanthemum. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 158, The Fierce Fight of the Fourth Hokage. Minato's attack was undoubtedly powerful, but luck seemed to be on the Sand Shinobi's side today. The one who had just been marked was only the woman named Garuda. Even if the same blow had struck Gilai, who was covered in sand armor, it would have been enough to incapacitate her, but that woman. Shukaku, fleeing far away, Minato returned to the tree where he had stood before. Across from him, the once stern woman had completely transformed. A scarlet chakra sheath had enveloped her body, and the ominous aura on the tail jutting out from behind, confirmed that this was the Jinchuriki of the Sand Shinobi village. You have no chance of winning. Gilai stood beside Garuda, bracing himself against the ground with one palm, not even looking up. Even if it's really Konoha White Fang, he can't stand up against a cage level and another Jinchuriki alone. Surrender. Silently, Minato's expression grew serious, but it was clear he wasn't about to listen to her advice. He pulled a special kunai from his ninja tool bag. That thing, more like a small trident, was heavier than an ordinary kunai. An average person would probably be a little uncomfortable using it. But anyone who had witnessed its power would instantly want to turn and run. From now on, Namikaze Minato would be using all his strength. Ever since possessing the Thunderbolt, Minato had consciously begun to hold back in battle, causing many to forget. Even without the White Fang's legacy, Minato, with a Flying Thunder God Jutsu, was still incredibly elusive. Space Ninjutsu. Compared to the more visible wood release, in a sense, this was a more difficult trick to defend against. At least for now, the Fourth Hokage, who was on high alert, still didn't dare to make a single move. That previous surprise attack. There was absolutely no sign of it at all. Could the opponent freely travel through space? No, if that were the case, he should have attacked them both long ago. From the moment they first made contact, he had countless opportunities to kill me. In that situation, even he shouldn't have held back. So, does that mean his space-based ninjutsu requires some kind of medium? Reflecting on the previous battle, if I had to say anything different about him and Garuda, it was just that the latter had a brief physical contact with the opponent. Was the mark left at that time? Gilai's eyes subconsciously glanced at his companion, who had already used the chakra coat. Was the tailed beast's chakra not further attacked because the mark left by the opponent? If so, Gilai clenched his fists. He had to completely give up close and personal combat. With space-based ninjutsu, the opponent could easily escape at any time. Conversely, if he was marked, Gilai was not a Jinchuriki, unable to transform into a tailed beast, and he would most likely be killed instantly in close combat. Was this the golden flash that the front line feared so much? He was indeed a difficult character. Garuda, now he had to give it his all. If this powerful ninja mastering space-based ninjutsu wasn't defeated here, the potential impact would be catastrophic. Furthermore, with his ability to escape at will, The possibility of him being trapped like White Fang was in the past was practically non-existent. He was a swift, reckless god of death. Roar, the Jinchuriki, now partially transformed into a tailed beast, had clearly lost some of his sanity, but thankfully, his training had at least enabled him to cooperate with his teammates. A furious charge. The Jinchuriki's power was fully demonstrated at this moment. The fundamental improvement in physical fitness brought about by partial tailed beast transformation instantly transformed Garuda from a ninjutsu-focused ninja to a ninjutsu and taijutsu proficient ninja. Even more terrifying, because she could tap into some of Shukaku's power, the sand in her hands now resembled a Keki Genkai, no hand seals were needed. The sand before her was like her limbs, and as Garuda suddenly accelerated, it rushed frantically towards Minato. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Minato calmly launched his own kunai, a sky full of kunai. Almost at the same time, he himself began to accelerate madly towards the direction of the Ichibi. Head-on attack. Gai, who was standing behind, also clenched his hands, his eyes fixed on the direction of the collision without blinking, ready to support with ninjutsu at any time. Getting closer and closer. The two sides were about to erupt in a fierce collision. But Minato, who was supposed to appear in front of Garuda, suddenly disappeared. Flying Thunder God technique. A large part of the kunai just thrown had been intercepted, but a few still penetrated the blockade of the sand. Those special kunai that had long been engraved have now become Minato's special coordinates. As soon as he landed, Minato threw his own kunai again. The speed was so smooth that most people couldn't even catch his figure. Flying Thunder God, second stage. The figure jumped again. Even the afterimage left in the original place had not disappeared. The golden flash, at this moment, finally showed his true strength. With the immense power boost from the internalized Thunderbolt, and the Flying Thunder God technique's ability to move beyond the very definition of speed, Minato Namikaze has now become a terrifyingly powerful ninja. In the blink of an eye, the battlefield shifted. His left hand gripped his opponent's wrist, and the kunai in his right hand transformed into a stream of light. Minato reappeared before Gai, who barely reacted. Slash. The kunai swung. The destructive force instantly pierced through his opponent's body, and the rest of him turned to quicksand. Sand substitute. Higher up, Gai clenched his hands, and the fine quicksand practically engulfed Minato. In less than 2 seconds, he would be crushed to pulp. But, at that moment, his movements froze. His previous substitution technique had been perfectly executed, allowing Gai to escape with the aid of this jutsu just before the kunai entered his body. A perfect strategy, but he seemed to have overlooked something, the left hand gripping his wrist. Just as he leveled his hands, ready to unleash his jutsu, Gai saw that inconspicuous, tiny mark on his right wrist, Flying Thunder God Jutsu. There wasn't any powerful killing move at this moment. Minato simply thrust out a kunai. Gai did his best to avoid vital points, but the kunai still pierced his lung. The battle between the current Fourth Hokage and the next Fourth Hokage had finally come to a temporary end. The Fourth Hokage, defeated. Chapter 159, Kill 1000 enemies. The Hokage had fallen. The Sand Ninja's momentum suffered a further devastating blow. The radiant Konoha ninja had truly transformed into an almighty god of war. Kazekage-sama, a heart-wrenching cry pierced the air. A red figure suddenly swept past, finally catching the falling ninja in its embrace at the crucial moment. The corrosive chakra instantly burned the skin on Gai's right arm, and, of course, simultaneously erased a mark already planted. Returned to the village, the sound, like sandpaper scraping against each other, finally reached Gai's ears. Though his consciousness was beginning to fade, as the Kazekage, he reluctantly nodded, he couldn't die yet. Even the Wind Nation, one of the 5 great nations, couldn't accept the loss of 2 Kazekages in such a short period of time. With a powerful throw, Gai instantly escaped the frontal battlefield and was delivered into the arms of the approaching Sand Ninja. Everyone, retreat immediately. Boom. The order was given, and the epic escape seemed to be fast-forwarded. This time, no one could turn back, except the ninja standing in Minato's way. Garuda, the Jinchuriki of the one-tailed Shukaku of the Sand Village. Honestly, if it were just one person, across the entire battlefield, no ninja could defeat Minato. Mastering special ninjutsu, he appeared and disappeared with incredible speed, making it impossible to predict his next move. Meanwhile, Minato could easily shake off any opponent and dispatch him at the perfect moment. In a one-on-one situation, the balance of victory was already lopsided. But Garuda had no other choice. Someone had to stop him, or else not just the Kazekage, but most of the Sans Shinobi would perish in this meaningless escape. The fragile Sans Shinobi could no longer bear such a loss. So, just for a moment, she would stop this glittering man here, even if roar, a dehumanizing roar emanated from her mouth. Garuda, who had previously maintained a human-like posture, was gradually transforming into a beast, his thick right arm suddenly thrust out. Unlike the arm covered in chakra before, this time, it was composed entirely of sand with purple patterns. Was this the beginning of his tailed beast transformation? Minato, already nearly impossible to track, became even more terrifying with the help of space ninjutsu. Even after using the tailed beast's chakra, Garuda was not sure she could keep up with his opponent's fighting rhythm. So, there was only one thing she could do: give Minato a reason to stay here. Tailed beast transformation. The Jinchuriki's final combat method, completely merging his own chakra with the tailed beast's, temporarily releasing the tailed beast from his body. However, only a very few Jinchuriki can achieve this, rather than being devoured directly by the tailed beasts. When chakra is liberated to this point, the human mind can no longer restrain the tailed beast within. Unless the opponent also cooperates, the result will be an unstoppable rampage. This is one of the reasons why Jinchuriki usually don't use this move. Wanton destruction is equally deadly to one's own forces. But now, Garuda doesn't have to worry about this. This is within the territory of the Land of Fire, and all the Sand Shinobi have begun to retreat. If Minato doesn't stay to contain her, this place, and even Kikayo Castle, will sooner or later become a graveyard for Shukaku to run wild. Attack! Attack! The last remaining consciousness commanded the body. Chakra and physical energy were pushed to the extreme. Garuda, almost transforming into a tailed beast, madly rushed towards the only enemy before him. Namikaze Minato. The Sand Shinobi were in retreat. But Minato couldn't just let them go. Before the battle began, Shinryu had formulated his strategy for this situation. This time, their goal wasn't just to repel the Sand Shinobi, they were to force them out of the Ninja World War. He couldn't just leave the Jinchuriki alone, but for Minato, letting the main force of the Sand Shinobi escape would also mean mission failure. A dilemma. An unsolvable choice. Yet, at this moment, facing all this, Minato showed no sign of worry. In fact, for the first time since the battle began, he smiled, a smile that was like a verdict, as if they had already won the war. Chakra concentrated. With a steady blow, Minato slammed Shukaku, who had lunged at him, to the ground. Although this move would only further enrage the tailed beast, Minato remained confident. Nice pass! That mischievous voice rang out, and immediately after, thick wooden bars instantly rose from the ground, trapping the ferocious incomplete Shukaku within them. Beside them, dozens of towering wooden pillars were erected in a circular formation. Wood-style, pillar defense technique. A ninja dressed in black appeared among the Sand Shinobi formation, standing out against a current. He smiled, that incredibly disgusting smile, and he walked step by step towards Minato. As he took each step, terrifying giant trees rose from the distance, instantly destroying the once relatively flat land beyond recognition. Wood-style. It was wood-style. And the name of the ninja who had just arrived on the battlefield was naturally on the verge of being revealed. The Thousand Hands of Konoha Forest, Shinju Senju, the technique, which far exceeded the maximum killing range of Shinryu in the normal sense, continued to grow, but both its speed and power seemed insufficient to cause trouble to the elites above the Chunin level. Only a small number of cannon fodder were killed in this massive but ineffective first wave of attacks. What exactly was he trying to do? In the panic, only Guy, who was carried on his back by his subordinates, noticed some clues. On those seemingly harmless branches, the inconspicuous markings were like the glance of the god of death. Shinryu tilted his head and glanced at Minato mischievously. The latter nodded firmly. No one saw that the special Kunai began to shine with an even brighter light. Flying Thunder God technique. Third stage, Takamikazuchi. There was about a second of silence. In that vast sea of trees, no desperate howls were heard. But a second later, thousands of sand ninjas were left forever on the Land of Fire. The splattered blood, the distant smell of gunpowder filling the air, the trembling creatures that suddenly fell silent. Even at one point, more ninjas stopped in their tracks, desperately waiting for the judgment of God. In a second, The flying thunder god technique was used multiple times, blood vessels burst, comrades fell silently, and that fleeting flash of golden light. All of this will be imprinted in the hearts of the ninjas of the Land of Wind, for 1 generation, 2 generations, even generations to come. Just like the first generation back then, the fear will be sung forever. P.S. Second update. I ask for everything, and also for some motivation to make me explode. Chapter 160, Barrier of Despair. Escape. Escape. Until they had forgotten the purpose of escaping. Forget the consciousness of resistance, even the most basic reverence and fear for life had disappeared. No, it should be said that the Sans Shinobi had been swallowed by an even greater fear. That kind of despair for the future, and the numbness of the huge threat approaching from behind. Fight? No, this has long been a one-sided massacre. Even if a few enemies appeared occasionally, finally going crazy due to collapse, the terrifying wood release technique, or the sudden arrival of the instant body, would kill them one by one in a very short time. They could only flee. But not for their own lives. Death, judging by the current situation, was already inevitable. Escape, just for the sake of escape. There was no extra meaning in the empty and desperate eyes. Every second, someone was caught up by the demon behind them and swallowed in one gulp. Every second, someone stopped and wept, awaiting the judgment of fate. Is this a sin sent from heaven? Or maybe it's a punishment from heaven. Is that the end? The wood release restrained around Garuda's body continuously absorbs the escaping chakra. At this point, not to mention the incomplete transformation into the tailed beast, even the most basic chakra cloak cannot be maintained. This is wood release? Legend has it that even the mightiest tailed beast, the Nine Tails, was forced to submit to this supreme ninjutsu. The chakra stolen from her continued to accumulate, even being harnessed by the wood release technique itself, grows stronger, thicker branches, binding her body inexorably. Layer upon layer of dense twigs gradually obscures the sunlight. Not only Garuda, even the monster within her body is gradually settling down. If this continues, she'll surely be sealed again, right? She'll become a pointless captive of Konoha, a bargaining chip for the next negotiation. If she falls asleep like this, after all, there's nothing she can do. Kazekage-sama will die. The Sand Shinobi will be defeated, and the entire Wind Kingdom will once again be bathed in pain and terror. No. Don't do this, she reached out, forcefully ripping the wood release restraints apart. But in the blink of an eye, the tighter bonds obscured her form. If this ends, there'll truly be nothing left. This absolutely cannot happen. At least, the darkness was spreading, that utter silence terrifying, yet also, it could lull one into deep sleep. Roar, a roar sharper than any before. The monster hidden in the sand, hidden in the darkness, finally let out its original roar, carrying Garuda's strongest obsession. Alala, what a big commotion! A voice full of charm sounded, and what appeared soon after was indeed a perfect and alluring woman, a woman with Uchiha and Sharingan. It's okay to let you make a big fuss, but from now on, I have to let you be quiet for a while. She said so, and the three Magatama in her eyes also spun rapidly. The dividing line, the pursuit lasted for more than a day, and until this moment, this one-sided massacre finally ushered in the final climax. Within sight, the sand village loomed before the fugitives. The despair of this journey had left less than half the remaining Sans Shinobi. But even so, the prospect of returning to their village lifted a modicum of courage. Soon, they would be back home. As long as they had the advantage of the terrain, as long as they could still unite with the village's forces. Don't come over here. Just as the first group of arrivals were about to cross the narrow gap, the garrison's cries echoed from the other side of the village. Don't even approach the village, don't go back? Why? Are they abandoning them here? Two terrifying Shinigami are stalking them closely. You must be kidding. The Sand Shinobi, already losing his mind, ignored his companion's advice. He even ignored why so many Sand Shinobi were scattered around the village. His final strength propelled him toward the narrow gap, like a moth to a wildfire. And then, his body literally burst into flames. Just one step away from the village, he died in agony. Yes, this was the massive trap that Shinayu had set the day before, a massive barrier enveloping the entire sand village. Sealing technique, 4 symbols suppression. Was the massive Sand Shinobi army gathering head-on more formidable, or were the remaining forces entrenched in the village more formidable? Shinayu had asked himself this question before, and his answer was unwavering. Of course, the village's brood of immortals was more formidable. Even if Konoha's army were annihilated, no force would be the first to attack Konoha's headquarters. Every ninja village has a last resort, but generally, they never have the opportunity to use it. Those meticulously laid runes were never meant to destroy the Sans Shinobi village. Shinju's goal was simply to trap them all there. Only by doing so would he have enough time to completely annihilate the invading Sans Shinobi army. Recommending a friend's work. This is hentai, so is it something I wrote? Ahem, anyone who reads it will know. Also, this is the third update. Everyone. Your rewards and recommendations are my motivation to move forward. Chapter 161, My Ninja Way. One day ago, the key to victory had been placed in his hands. Guy gripped the broken wood tightly. He knew that if he carved just one last rune, his teacher's campaign would be successful, and this war would end with Konoha's victory. As long as he could succeed. Bright red blood trickled from his eyes. Although Shinayu had already stopped most of the enemies, the Sans Shinobi had already sent out more than one scouting team, or rather, those scouts who had been outside the village had received the intelligence and were converging here. Normally, during this period, scarce Jounin resources wouldn't be easily used for patrols, but today, Guy's luck certainly wasn't good. While on duty, he unexpectedly encountered two enemy groups, both led by Jounin. This was a worst-case scenario. And the bad news didn't stop there. According to the prearranged time frame, Guy had no time to engage the enemy. If he simply led them to Shinju's teacher, it would be too late. Besides, the teacher was likely already dealing with another opponent, so adding to the trouble was pointless. 5 minutes left. All Guy could do was to quickly dispatch these enemies in those 5 minutes. Konoha, Goreki. A powerful surprise attack from the weaker side. Facing the pressure from the opposing Jounin, Guy, just like last time, set his sights squarely on the enemy's Jounin, but without Shinayu to distract the Jounin. This strategy was reckless. His incredibly powerful punches and kicks were blocked for the first time. Though the opponent, perhaps miscalculating the impact, wavered for a moment, that extraordinary hardness was rock armor. Instantly detached. Both sides were back to their starting positions. Damn, was this a ninja skilled in earth escape? The attack that had just landed hadn't done any real damage. On the contrary, being caught off guard, Guy's right leg had been slightly injured by the powerful recoil. Was that truly worthy of a Jounin-level defense? His battle-ready stance never relaxed, but even so, Kai's heart couldn't help but sink. At this rate, let alone defeating these enemies within 5 minutes, even holding out for 5 minutes would be difficult. For a taijutsu type like him, Earth Style, with its formidable defense, was undoubtedly the most formidable. If that were the case. 8 gates? Kai clenched his fists fiercely. No, I couldn't do that. It wasn't that he was worried about his physical condition after using this technique, but based on previous experience, he couldn't possibly hold his own against a Jounin unless he used the 5th gate or higher. And after a short burst of power, the severe after effects would even temporarily incapacitate him, let alone complete the rune engraving as planned. He had to find a way to finish this guy off. The seconds ticked by, and the opponent showed no sign of giving Kai time to think. Earth Style, Yellow Swamp. As expected of a seasoned Jounin, after determining his opponent was a taijutsu-savvy ninja, he immediately devised a strategy. Just like the Kazukage's handling of Minato, for this type of ninja, the first thing to do is to restrict their movements. Of course, Shinayu had taught Guy the same lesson. The weakness of a taijutsu-savvy ninja is that if their range of movement is restricted, it's difficult for them to do anything. And for a ninjutsu-savvy ninja, their Achilles heel is the moment before they unleash their ninjutsu. He can't use the 8 gates, because if he uses this big move to defeat the enemy, he will lose his follow-up, but other than that, Kai is not completely helpless. During this period, what Zenaion taught him was certainly not just something as simple as the 8 gates. In fact, no matter what kind of ninja, even if they use the same ninjutsu, there will be slight differences each time. By extension, every punch, every kick, will cause slight changes in power due to the difference in chakra flow. What Kai did before was to use his own training to hone the most suitable and efficient chakra output method for himself over and over again. In this case, the amount of chakra used was reduced to a minimum, and the effect produced was terrifying. However, all of this was done unconsciously by Kai, because it was the right thing to do, so he did it, and this also meant that this method of attack was succumbing to the body's self-preservation instinct. Just like no matter how hard a person punches, the muscles will ensure their own safety within the maximum extent. This is a subconscious instinct, and it is also Kai's strongest and weakest point. But above this, under Zenyaong's training, Kai began to reach a higher level. Bend the legs, and exert force. The unusual contraction of the muscle tissue means that the method of exerting force has undergone a huge change. No, that only refers to the comparison with normal people. In fact, every time Kai exerts force, he roughly follows this path. However, this time, the chakra flow he uses is far beyond the usual. Bang! A huge cloud of dust was raised from the ground. Before the ninjutsu took effect, Kai's figure disappeared from the opponent's side in almost a blink of an eye. Kai, you have to understand that there has hardly ever been a ninja who dominated the ninja world by relying solely on physical skills, Shin-Aong spoke bluntly. He stared into the boy's eyes, so he didn't miss that hint of disappointment. But from today on, I hope you can remember one thing. As a disciple of Senju Shin-Aong, you. The expected pain quickly swept through his nerves, but above that, the whistling gust of wind symbolized the power of this whip kick. That's right, using this kind of move is actually self-destruction. Normal people would never want to use such a risky move, because in the eyes of normal people, this is something that is absolutely impossible to do. Absolutely impossible. Just like they think that if you only have physical skills, it is impossible to become an excellent ninja. From that day on, when Shin-Aong patted him on the shoulder and told Kai those words, this kid with thick eyebrows had his own motto, and at the same time, this is also the ninja way that he will carry out throughout his life. No matter the circumstances, no matter what tragedies he endures, Kai will always remember one thing. As Senju Shin-Aong's disciple, he will be the man who makes the impossible possible. Fools may be slow to speak, but if you insist on asking why, the roaring thunder holds the complete answer. My style, Mingli. P.S. Today marks the 4th update. This week, I believe everyone has witnessed the stubbornness of existence. Hurry and send in all your votes and rewards. Chapter 162, I will use my broken body to build your great wall. What's wrong? Don't you want to escape anymore? Shin-Aong's teasing voice echoed from far away. From the shadows of the dunes, two terrifying figures appeared together, step by step, approaching the desperate sand ninja. Long ago, countless battles had seen miracles achieved through desperate efforts, but it was clear that this time, no miracle would befall them. Shin-Aong wasn't that foolish. From the outset, he had never pushed the sand ninja into a truly desperate situation. When there was still a glimmer of hope, foolish humans never considered how to resist. Like frogs in warm water, they kept running away, escaping reality, escaping their own fears. And when they were truly cornered, with no way out, the desperate sand ninja finally realized that, along the long journey of escape, they had lost their weapons, their armor, and even, their courage and bravery. What awaited them was only the irresistible death. It's okay. It only takes a moment, it'll be over soon. A devilish smile etched on his face as he inched closer to the sand shinobi camp, unhurriedly spouting chilling words. Wood release, tree realm arrives. Gigantic trees appeared out of thin air on the battlefield. The knight's pursuit hadn't drained any of their chakra. Instead, the constant absorption of those victims fueled a surge of energy within them. Compared to last time, these thick branches were even more deadly, and the engraved sigils had become even denser. Minato also did not hesitate. With the help of Shin-Aong's ability, he was also in excellent condition. The team endurance of the wood release users was best reflected in the two of them. Of course, this was also thanks to the previous experimental accident. In fact, the reason why Minato was able to complete the Takemoke's God was certainly not only due to the improvement of his space ninjutsu, relying on one person's strength. It was too difficult to complete multiple jumps in such a short time, but if there was another person who could provide him with coordinates and guidance at the same time, the process would become unexpectedly simple. Yes, that experiment was undoubtedly a failure from the original purpose. Shin-Aong had no way to share the chakra explosion generated by the Wuling and the energy in his body, but at the same time, he made an unexpected discovery. The fantasy that had always existed since childhood actually had the possibility of coming true. When Shin-Aong's chakra tried to enter Minato's body instantly turned to wood. But what astonished Shin-Aong was that he could actually control this woodification to a certain extent. All he needed was a little guidance from his side. So, the prototype of Takemoke's began to take shape in the brothers' minds. On the one hand, Minato used his knowledge of space ninjutsu and the wood escape ability borrowed from Shinayu to leave marks on the trees, while Shinayu used the space ability borrowed from Minato to guide Minato's movement. And so, a terrifying ninjutsu was born. A ninjutsu that could easily massacre the main force of the opposing ninja army on a large scale. Flying Thunder God Stage 3 to Kamikaze. Chi, bright red blood splattered once again. With no way forward and no shelter behind them, it might not be long before the main force of the Sand Shinobi would be slaughtered by Konoha's duo until they lost their most basic organization. They might be completely wiped out. Or they might become wandering ninjas in every corner of the ninja world. However, all of this is based on the fact that the sealing technique set up by Shinayu in advance can continue to be effective. The light blue light flickered for a moment, and then finally receded. Amidst a celebration that was almost like a roar, the huge sky curtain shattered. The barrier was ineffective, dividing line for unexpected situations. Ah, brat! Rock armor instantly enveloped his body, and the sand ninja roared as he lunged at Kai. The immense momentum even stirred up a powerful gust of wind. At this point, there was no point in hesitation. If he couldn't be defeated here, then all subsequent plans would be completely meaningless. 8 gates of ninjutsu. The 5th gate. Open. An explosion and despair, a fight to the death between the wounded. After the smoke and dust cleared, Kai, who could only barely stand there, finally won the victory. But this victory was a little too hard won. His meridians and muscles had been severely damaged. At this point, let alone injecting chakra into the broken wood and making the final mark, Kai didn't even have the strength to keep himself standing. Chakra was running wild in his body, completely out of control. Finally, had the mission failed? The teacher's signature wood release technique had appeared around the sand village, and this was also a sign that the operation was about to begin. Without this last rune, this operation would be meaningless. For the last time, Kai held the broken wood in his hands with trembling hands. After that, this somewhat strange and stubborn boy, without hesitation, pressed the broken wood against his chest. That's right, the teacher had said that this piece of wood would absorb chakra on its own and then make the correct mark. So since he couldn't extract chakra from his body normally, then he might as well just engrave the rune into his body. This is the most crucial moment of the mission, and since he has no way to continue fighting, he has only one choice left. With my remaining body, I will build your great wall. P.S. I will throw a tantrum and beg for anything. Chapter 163, 10-fold tonic pills. The pale blue light flickered for a moment, and then finally faded away, and amidst a celebration that was almost like a roar, the huge sky shattered. The barrier was invalid. War is always accompanied by too many coincidences. Just like the sand ninja failed to correctly estimate his and Minato's strength, Shinayu was also unable to take everything into consideration. In the original plan, this huge sealing barrier would last until he killed all the desperate sand ninjas and then gradually disappeared. To be more specific, this barrier should have lasted for about half a day. But the fact appeared before Shinayu's eyes: the barrier was invalid. For a moment, he even forgot to pursue, while the terrified sand shinobi rushed towards the village. They didn't want to face the demons behind them for a moment. They would rather leave greater losses on the negotiation table. Yes, even if the real hero failed to achieve his set strategic goals, the Sand Shinobi village has now completely lost the ability to fight. The Fourth Hokage was seriously injured, the Jinchuriki was lost, and the main force of the expedition had lost nearly 70% of its men in less than 10 days. And all this was just the work of 2 opposing ninjas. It's foreseeable that after this war, the pain and fear will reach far beyond the Sand Village. Any force still harboring ambitions for Konoha will be unable to avoid these 2 terrifying gods of death. Remember, even White Fang's glorious achievements before this were merely displays of immense strength in a single battle, within a single arena. At least not since the First Shinobi World War, had there ever been a single, unbroken battle like this, brought to an end by a single force. And in every conflict since then, the major powers of the ninja world have issued a decree that any mission encountering either Namikaze Minato or Senju Shinayu would not be counted as a mission failure. Those were 2 ninjas who conquered an entire nation. Of course, that's all for later. Faced with Shinayu and Minato, the Sand Shinobi fled in panic back to their base. The situation now clearly made it impossible to pursue them. But Shinayu wasn't about to give up. Wood release, diamond summoning wood. The Sand Ninjas, who had just passed through the narrow gap, hadn't even had time to wake from their nightmares when a crashing sound, like the sound of a huge bell, accompanied by a strong vibration, once again gripped their hearts. Are they coming again? Those two guys, are they determined to exterminate the Sand Ninja village? The ninjas on guard gripped their weapons tightly, and the newly arrived fugitives, they had long lost the courage to fight, staring blankly in the direction of the two men. The branches that struck the stone wall quickly disappeared, as if the thunderbolt strike just now was just a joke. The stone wall still stood tall and majestic, and the contempt on Zhenaiong's face grew even more prominent. Of course, he had no intention of attacking the Sand Village immediately, although it was not perfect, it was enough to achieve this level. The attack just now was just a demonstration, a show of strength. Of course, it was also to leave an unforgettable mark on the other party. On the huge stone wall, the wall that had just been enlarged had a strange symbol left on it. People who had experienced war would not be unfamiliar with this mark. The image of two flat hands, it was the symbol of the Konoha Senju clan. Turning to leave, Zhenaiong shook his head in disdain. Just consider it a visit, dividing line of the exclusive secret recipe. So, this guy has become like this. The war with the Wind Country can basically be declared over. Zhenaiong has fulfilled his promise before the war. But there are still many problems that need to worry him. For example, his favorite disciple in front of him, whose chakra has almost burned him beyond recognition. This idiot actually put that piece of wood directly into his body. Who in his right mind would have such an idea? That is a super powerful barrier that is enough to trap the entire Sand Village. Such powerful energy, who in his right mind would think of letting it flow through his body? He's simply a lunatic. Zhenaiong slapped himself in the face. Well, thanks to him, the barrier can function normally. Of course, the most important thing is this silly kid, who is his own disciple. Senju Zhenaiong is a well-known person who helps his relatives but not his friends. He gently placed his hands on Kai's dying chest, and the surging life energy immediately entered the kid's body, muscles, tissues, bones. The meridians where chakra flows, all of which recovered quickly with the help of Zhenaiong until they were completely restored to their original state. Oh no, strictly speaking, it's not completely recovered. The unscrupulous teacher Senju Zhenaiong deliberately left a little lesson for his stupid disciple. He retained most of the links that would make people feel pain. Sitting in the carriage on the way back, Zhenaiong touched his chin with a smirk, and then asked Kakashi and others who had returned from completing the mission to ask for some fodder. If memory serves me right, when Rock Lee was injured, Kai seemed to have personally made some secret healing medicine. Thinking of this, Zhenaiong's smile became even more evil. 10-fold tonic pills, the more the better. Please vote. Please everything. Chapter 164, The Mastermind. Teacher, what's this? Gazing at the huge plate of dark, unbearable, ball-like objects before him, Kai's eyes subconsciously twitched. Of course, he had no intention of doubting his beloved teacher. The only thing the child wanted to know was if there was a gentler way to treat the disease than eating the entire plateful. What's wrong? Zhenaiong had a blank expression. Oh no, he looked calmly at Kai, still bandaged and covered in plaster. Although his injuries had actually healed, Zhenaiong had given Kai 2 oversized plaster casts to ensure the quality of treatment and threatened him with irreversible sequelae if he didn't. For a speedy recovery, shouldn't you take your medicine properly? It was a question, but Zhenaiong's tone carried a distinctly undeniable threat. A threat. Can't you just not take it? I'll break your legs if you don't finish it properly. The above conversation could actually turn out like this, but we are all civilized people. The reason for doing this, in addition to punishing this brainless and stubborn disciple, is actually not really meaningless. Those pills, ahem, Zhenaiong did not deny that he deliberately added some fresh grass to adjust the taste, but most of them were precious medicine stored in the sealed scrolls with him. This could probably be regarded as a benefit brought by the wood release physique. He who could easily feel the life energy could also feel the value of the medicine through these, and the control over plants also made it very simple for Zhenaiong to arrange the medicinal properties reasonably and make them into medicines that are beneficial to the body. Maybe it can be regarded as a blessing in disguise. Kai, who was infused with such a powerful chakra, had already been destroyed beyond recognition. But in fact, for his originally ordinary meridians and talents, it became a great opportunity for him to be reborn. Of course, it would be in vain if Zhenaiong didn't help him recover. And after Zhenaiong's treatment was completed, what Kai needed now was nutritional supplements to stabilize his meridians that had just been greatly strengthened. Although the taste of these tonics is indeed killing. But then again, This is also one of the teacher's pleasures, isn't it? Pushing aside the door curtain, Minato called out to Zenyong in a serious tone. His instinct told him that something that could make little son so worried was definitely not a good thing. But it was obvious that Zenyong still underestimated the size of this trouble. That woman? Actually, under the circumstances, Shinayu remembered that he should have sealed her with wood release. Given Shukaku's strength, she shouldn't have been able to break free. But now that he thought about it, he was a tailed beast level being. Was he too careless back then? Did Shukaku go berserk? No. Minato shook his head, then continued. She was still well sealed when Shikaku and the others arrived, but in fact, according to the on-site investigation team and the interrogation team, the target had shown signs of going berserk before being subdued. Going berserk? Subdued? Shinayu frowned as well. Even if it was the weakest of all the tailed beasts, it was still the one-tailed Shukaku. To completely control it, there was no better way besides wood release. No. That's not right. There was another way. A drop of sweat trickled down Shin's forehead. Anything else discovered at the scene? Yes, Minato nodded. When the interrogation team attempted to invade his memory, they discovered signs that he had been under hypnosis. That's right, absolutely. Shin clenched his fists. Although it was indeed hard to believe, the only way to easily control the tailed beasts like this, besides wood release, was with a Sharingan, also from Konoha, and it required a Sharingan of at least a Mangekyo level. With Eagle undoubtedly absent from the battlefield, the remaining name was already on the verge of being revealed. It's the Sharingan. Shin practically gritted his teeth. Uchiha Madara, finally, after all this time, Shin had finally touched this most deadly tentacle hidden in the darkness. P.S. 3 more updates. Keep asking for everything. The votes were thrown aside again. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 165, The Beginning of the Conspiracy. It's the Sharingan. Shinayong practically squeezed out the words through his teeth. Uchiha Madara, finally, after all this time, Shinayong finally touched this most deadly tentacle hidden in the darkness. Iron Hand, give me instructions immediately. Have the interrogation squad confirm the hypnotist's identity from the Jinchuriki at all costs. Yes, Shinayong stared gloomily into the unknown distance. Undoubtedly, Shinayong feared this legendary ninja even more than he feared the entire Sands village. And in the years since, the resurrected Uchiha Madara had proven his legend to be true. Single-handedly, he could take on the entire shinobi alliance, even toying with the 5 Hokage. Just as he'd said. In the entire world, the only one who could defeat him in a one-on-one fight was the Shadaime Hokage, Senju Hoshirama. Shadaime, although it was still too early to play his trump card, but if he could really track down Madara. Zenyong stared at his palm fiercely. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a bad idea to fight in advance. After all, this was Madara's weakest moment. And if it was an enemy other than Madara, I could just defeat it myself. People grow up, and so-called ideals gradually turn into more realistic, uglier ambitions that create conflict and evolve into death. But it is precisely because of this simplest, most selfish desire that humanity continues to progressing to a realm that cannot be imagined. Striving to reach high, even if he crawls on the muddy ground, even if he thirstily drinks dirty and smelly sewage, even if he is tortured by sharp thorns and covered with scars, the man called Senju Shinayu, the man who always looks at the whole world with a contemptuous smile, must become stronger than anyone else. Yes. From the past to now, I have always been too persistent. Whether it is Obito who can use space ninjutsu, Kabuto Yakushi, or even Uchiha Madara, there is no difference. Anyone who appears in front of him is just an enemy, and he is the god of death who brings death to his enemies. Hey, Minato, Shinayu, finally relieved, jokingly nudged the little son's chest with his elbow. What kind of nicknames will we get after this time? With a playful tone, Zenyong instantly turned back into the naughty kid. It would be great if I could be as handsome as Tsukumo-sensei. The dividing line of conspiracy. The huge conference room was immersed in depression and darkness. The teams were vaguely divided into 2 sides, without speaking to each other, but anyone could feel the fear hidden in this silence. And it was this fear that made the two forces that were originally impossible to reconcile sit together. How is it? An old voice sounded. His existence was almost as old as the Iwagakure. Third House Hokage, we are not sitting here just to be silent, are we? That's right, the one sitting opposite that Hokage, the two great binaries Inoki, was none other than the leader of the Kumagakure, the Third House Hokage, known as the mortal enemy of the Iwagakure. You're right, two great binaries, compared to the Hokage, his voice was more steady and powerful. Konoha has unknowingly begun to gradually recover its former glory, 10 years ago. Ever since the young man who could use wood release first appeared in people's sight, almost all the forces in the ninja world felt threatened. But they were still too naive. 10 years, for a ninja's growth, 10 years is actually nothing. However, no one would have thought that 10 years later, that little kid from back then would have grown to this level. The darkness of the ink shadow, Senju Shinayu, the golden flash, Namikaze Minato. Konoha's gifted twins. These two young men, around 20 years old, had, in just 10 days, before the Sand Shinobi village's envoys had even returned from the other great powers. They had already decimated the entire front line of the Sand Shinobi. What terrifying combat prowess! Furthermore, intelligence revealed that in this battle, apart from the overwhelmingly fast Minato Namikaze, Shinayu Senju had yet to fully utilize his wood release technique. The legendary wood release, the strongest of all, who subdued all the tailed beasts and distributed them as ultimate power to the other ninja villages, hadn't even made his debut yet. After the Second Shinobi World War, every nation was scrambling to recover. By the time they regained consciousness, Konoha had unknowingly gained overwhelming strength. The number of cage-level warriors directly determines a nation's combat effectiveness. So, let's count them. The ninja hero, Sarutobi Hiruzen, Konoha White Fang, Hatake Sakumo, the Mad Ghost, Jiraiya, the Cold King, Orochimaru, the Konoha Princess, Senju Tsunade. Now, we have to add Shinayu and Minato. And these are just the strengths that Konoha has already shown on the surface. No one can imagine how powerful Konoha is now. It is for this reason. A huge conspiracy began to brew in the ninja world. The dark clouds of the Third World War are rolling. P.S. Thanks to the book friend Moyefin for the suggestion, the nicknames of the protagonist and Minato. Chapter 166, Hypocritical War. In the spring of Konoha's 47th year, the war had been underway for nearly a month, or rather, during this time, the ninja world had fallen into an uncharacteristic silence. The instigators of all this were two ninjas affiliated with Konoha. The Sand Shinobi, who had invaded beyond Mount Kikyo with the swiftness and ferocity of wildfire, had never anticipated the swiftness and ferocity of Konoha's counterattack. In less than 10 days, Konoha had completed the entire process, from subjugation to surrender, without even a shred of bargaining. Yet, in contrast to the Sand Shinobi's tragic end, these short 10 days had etched the names of two young men in the ninja world. Konoha's divine twins, the dark shadow of Senju Shinayu, and the golden glitter of Namikaze Minato. While the ninja world usually judges worth by its results, this time, this jaw-dropping process could not be ignored. This was a victory of two men over an entire nation. This one-sided slaughter instantly elevated these two young men to the status of gods. By now, Shinayu and Minato were heroes of Konoha, deities of death in the eyes of the other ninja villages. This unexpected victory also quieted the rest of potential enemies. But as everyone expected, once the flames of war ignite, they are difficult to extinguish. After a period of silence spanning over half a month, the conflict between the Iwagakure and Kumagakure ninjas finally erupted. Around the border of their respective nations, Mount Kumagakure, please don't criticize the name, fellow Taoists, the armies of both nations finally engaged in a fierce battle. Intelligence indicates that as the fighting intensifies, the Third Hokage has invited the Mist Ninja to assist, and troops from the Water Country are also en route to the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Third Hokage, the two Great Pyramids, have also extended an invitation to the most powerful Konoha. They promise to split the spoils of war equally with Konoha if they defeat the Kumagakure ninja, an offer practically impossible to refuse. However, within Konoha, this incident has divided two diametrically opposed factions. This is simply foolish, the meeting resumes. However, this time, because there was no sense of crisis like last time, it became more chaotic. If we don't help the Iwagakure at this time and gain greater benefits, Once the Iwagakure fails in the battle against the two major ninja armies of Kumo and Mist, Konoha will be the next target of disaster. Elder Sakahara. You are too anxious. Before the previous elder finished speaking, another one stood up. Although Konoha did not pay a great price to defeat the Sanjakure, the current situation is that the restoration and reconstruction of the facilities destroyed in the war is the top priority. Rashly getting involved in the war of other major countries may eventually evolve into an irreversible situation. What do you mean? Isn't this clear enough? If this goes on, it will sooner or later evolve into a new ninja world war. The war has already started. Buzzword. With one hand supporting his chin, Shin'Aong squinted his eyes and sat next to the Sandaime. He originally had an extraordinary status in Konoha village, but after this battle, the whole scene fell silent as soon as he opened his mouth. Even the Sandaime who was sitting next to him looked at him sideways. Mayu, the shuriken had been replaced with a pipe at some point. And Sarutobi was getting old now. What do you think about this? Isn't it obvious? Looking around at everyone, he didn't know when it started, but now Mayu had become like Danzo in the past, and no one dared to look him in the eye. He sneered, and continued. I would like to ask you all, with a tiger by your side, do you still have room to compete with a wolf for food? You mean, in fact, the Sandaime's considerations were basically the same. Even if the Sans Shinobi is the weakest among the 5 major nations, now that Konoha has demonstrated overwhelming strength, is it possible that the Rock Shinobi and the Cloud Shinobi will start a war over a conflict that has not been resolved for decades? His gaze cast into the distance. If that is really the case, I would suggest taking advantage of this opportunity to directly invade the land of Earth or the land of Lightning. The elders took a deep breath. Not only because of the foresight of this young man, but more importantly, because of his undisguised ambition. Sure enough, the guy who can succeed Danzo and take charge of the route will not be a pushover. It is better to say that the young Shinai is more aggressive than Danzo. So, no matter what gestures the Cloud Shinobi and the Rock Shinobi make, just ignore them. This farce will eventually come to an end. This is probably the conservative approach. Yeah, Sarutobi nodded. This was basically the decision he made as the Hokage. As long as they didn't get involved in this fight, Konoha would be able to maintain its ability to cope with all kinds of changes. But in my opinion, Shin'Aong suddenly raised his voice, drawing everyone's attention to himself. Instead of waiting for all the other ninja villages to unite and resist Konoha, it's better to take the initiative. Shin'Aong stood up, just like he did before when he asked for a fight. I apply to accept the invitation from the Iwagakure. Chapter 167, The Possibility of Evolution. The strategy was finally confirmed. Under the insistence of the Sandaime, although Konoha agreed to the Iwagakure's request, it postponed the time of attack. Not only Konoha, but some other forces also felt the atmosphere. Compared with the Second World War, this Ninja World War may return to the form of the First World War. For the overly powerful Konoha, other ninja villages can only temporarily form an alliance. However, these are not the issues that Shin'Aong cares about. This war is simply unavoidable. What we should consider now is how to gain an advantageous position as much as possible when the war begins. You know, the current situation is completely different from the Second World War. Although Konoha was attacked by all 3 major ninja villages during the previous war, it wasn't simultaneous. Even so, Konoha, fighting on 3 fronts, fought to the limit and ultimately achieved victory. This is why, after the war, Konoha didn't demand excessive reparations. Every participant had reached their limit, and there was no need to escalate the conflict any further. But this time was different. While defeating the Sand Shinobi cost Konoha almost no manpower, in the upcoming frontal battles, Konoha would likely face simultaneous attacks from the Mist, Cloud, and Rock Shinobi. Separately attacking the 3 major powers wouldn't be a problem for Konoha, but if they truly united their forces, even the strongest Konoha wouldn't have a good response. It would be a grueling battle. Well, if the current Shinai possessed the same power as the Sandaime, that would be a different story. Indeed, if that were the case, he alone could end the war. So, what exactly is the difference between the current Shinai and the Shogame Senju Hashirama? First of all, the power of the jutsu is self-evident. Shinai hasn't even mastered all the jutsu that the Shogame mastered. But that's not the key. After all, there's no other Uchiha Madara in the ninja world today, or rather, no Uchiha Madara at full strength. Back then, Even without relying on special moves like the True Thousand Hands and predecessor mode, the Shugame could definitely hold his own against all other ninjas. Just like how Madara barely used Susa's full form in his battles against the 5 Hokage and the allied ninja forces, let alone fusions with the tailed beasts. So, besides his ultimate ability, what exactly was lacking in Shinryu? First, there was the issue of total chakra and recovery capacity. While wood release could absorb an opponent's chakra, the amount of chakra required in a one-on-one fight, or in the moment of unleashing a ninjutsu, was still astronomical. Although compared to ordinary ninjas, Shinryu was now a tailed beast in human form, even so, he still couldn't sustain wood release for long, which was why he hadn't used large-scale tree realm descends, or why he couldn't maintain a high attack while maintaining a large area. And beyond this, Shinryu had an even greater dilemma. The more he studied yang release, the more he felt. Since he began practicing yang release until now, he had undergone 3 transformations, from nothing to something, through the backlash of wood release, and then to maturity with the accumulation of time. But he still felt that his yang release power was still not fully developed. The most obvious example is that, up to now, Shinryu has been unable to control the flower tree realm's arrival. Knowing nothing about yang-style techniques, Shinryu has always been groping his way forward, so even when he encountered problems, he had no one to turn to for advice. In the midst of pain and struggle, Shinryu gradually discovered a possibility for evolution, the Wulian within his body. Although yin-style and yang-style energies are almost completely incompatible, since absorbing the Wulian into his body, Shinryu has made some new discoveries. The wood-style techniques, once full of vitality, even capable of absorbing life force, have recently taken on a corrosive effect. Theoretically, this is an effect unique to yin-style techniques, much like the bone-rotting maggots of Amaterasu. So, let's hypothesize that this gradual yinization of yang-style techniques isn't just a side effect of the Wulian, but in fact, it's likely the very method by which yang-style techniques evolve. Yin alone cannot produce life, and yang alone cannot thrive. Since Shinryu's previous plan to share yin-style chakra with others had failed, why not try this? If he could complete the transformation of yin-style and yang-style techniques, maybe I can even reach a higher level? Just do it. With some time left before the battle, to cope with this completely unknown war, so different from history, Shinryu was forced to frantically search for any path to become stronger. Even if this path of evolution did carry a slight risk. Closing his eyes for a moment, Shinryu once again looked within. His steps stopped before the airtight seal. Indeed, he had personally suppressed the monster within him, and now, with a slight raise of his right hand, the mighty seal rips open a tiny crack. Roar! Roar! I'm going to kill you! A roar filled with resentment erupted almost simultaneously. Standing directly in front, Shinryu's lips curled slightly, yet he sneered nonchalantly. Unlike Naruto, he wasn't born with his mouth-to-mouth skills fully upgraded, nor did he believe he was the one predicted by the Six Paths sage. But he believed in his own strength, and believed that one day, he would surpass all others. So, that smile is contemptuous and disdainful. P.S. It's the weekend, come on, please don't be stingy with your tips and recommendations. I'm still a long way from being a top student, with over 600 recommendations. I don't want to watch any more tips. Please give me some support. Chapter 168, The First Step. 10 days flew by in the blink of an eye. Daily intelligence arrived about the battles between the Land of Earth and the Land of Lightning on Mount Kumato, and only now had the Hokage officially announced the dispatch of Konoha's reinforcements. Theoretically, this vanguard force should have been a small force, but this time it was a formidable force. Not only were they led by Shinryu and Minato, but they also included elite generals like Hatake Tsukumo. And the surprise wasn't just that. In terms of equipment and other combat personnel, Konoha's force was truly elite. Even though the Land of Wind had already paid a large sum of supplies to the Land of Fire in exchange for their Jinchuriki, the comprehensiveness of Konoha's vanguard was truly unprecedented. Simply put, there were no Jonin in this force, and nearly every ninja was equipped with advanced combat gear, including detonating talismans and flash talismans. It was a sheer luxury. But that didn't matter. For Konoha, this vanguard would be the first and most crucial step in the entire war. No matter what, Sarutobi had to ensure their expenses to the maximum extent. According to the plan agreed upon with the envoys from the Land of Earth, Konoha's troops would not appear directly on the front line at Mount Kumato. They would go to the land of rain and head straight for the mainland of the land of lightning. This was also the way ninjas generally cooperated. Because of their conflicts, ninjas rarely fought side by side in the true sense. Even if they formed an alliance, most of the time they adopted the strategy of encircling way to save Zhao to fight on two fronts, and this had almost become an unwritten agreement. Since the land of wind had surrendered, Shin'Aong and his companions did not encounter any obstacles on the way to the land of rain. In times of chaos and war, perhaps for ordinary people, no place was absolutely safe, but for powerful ninjas, especially organized ninja units, it was still very safe to operate in non-enemy occupied areas. Even before the trip, Shin'Aong had thought about sending people to look for Yahiko and the other two who should still be active in the rain country while passing through it, and then taking this opportunity to bring the eyes originally planted by Madara back to Konoha. The only difference was that unlike in the past, Shin'Aong at that time had absolutely no right or ability to bring 3 people of unknown origin back to the village, and there was no guarantee that the old guy Danzo would not have any evil thoughts after seeing the pair of Rinnegan. But now it's different. If he could have invited these 3 old friends to Konoha in advance, Madara's chances would have been greatly hampered. But unfortunately, after Shin'Aong took over as the head of the route, he had been constantly trying to find the traces of the 3 people. Just like this time, the route people found nothing. However, this exploration gave Shin'Aong some unexpected surprises. In the Rain Village, which should have been completely safe, 3 route members that Shin'Aong sent to investigate were killed. None of the 4 people who returned were injured, but they all said that there seemed to be signs of large-scale personnel movement nearby. But who were the ones who launched the sneak attack? If we make an assumption, the route members who were killed must have discovered something. While the route members who returned found almost nothing, there are only 2 possibilities. One is that these route members have been replaced by the enemy. But considering the unique mark of the route, this possibility is infinitely close to 0. So, there can only be another possibility. Shin'Aong and his friends have been targeted by a very, very large force. Very, very large, even a little exaggerated. Along with a strange feeling, a not-so-good possibility became clear in Shin'Aong's mind. Putting the others aside, that old man, Inoki, was undoubtedly cunning and shrewd. Having lived longer and been more active than Sarutobi, despite his advanced age, he had always been fond of scheming and intrigue. Could he have imagined that Konoha had already seen through their plan? Especially since Konoha had deliberately delayed the dispatch of their troops. There was a 1 in 10,000 chance that he was truly senile and confused, and all the enemies had just underestimated them. Yes, Shin'Aong couldn't gamble on that 1 in 10,000 chance. So, if the enemy truly knew Konoha's intentions, what would they do now? Standing still wasn't the best idea. If Shin'Aong were the enemy commander, he would naturally choose an ambush, annihilate them as they approached the land of lightning, and the land of rain, with its flat terrain and difficult hiding places, was a perfect place to do so. Shin'Aong left the central army. He had to talk to Tsukumo and Minato. After all, this wasn't just a matter for them. They held Konoha's elite forces in their hands, a force they couldn't afford to lose. However, the flames of war were more intense than he had anticipated. Konoha had finally made its first move. Now, it was the other side's turn to respond. In this crucial showdown, any small mistake could potentially jeopardize the entire war. Chapter 169, Trap. Enemy attack. Konoha always maintained a rigorous approach to warfare. Once they had completely entered the Rain Village's territory, their search sentries never stopped working. But even so, the attack came so suddenly. Earth-style, 10,000 miles of earth-flowing wall, the Earth Kingdom Army, supposedly an ally and currently battling on Mount Yondu, suddenly appeared here, unleashing their deadly attack from the outset. Unlike other ninja villages, the Iwagakure excelled at group warfare. Most of the Iwagakure ninja were skilled in Earth-style ninjutsu, a technique with limited flexibility that made it difficult to gain an advantage in one-on-one combat, and they were primarily defensive. But the Iwagakure ninja exploited their strengths to avoid their weaknesses. In the frontal battlefield, they were the only opponent skilled at fighting in formation. The earth trembled. Farther away, with the densely packed Iwagakure ninja raised their arms and shouted, towering, continuous walls rose in the blink of an eye from both sides of the Konoha army. Then, rising ever higher, their tops were almost impossible to discern. What was just a plain suddenly turned into a canyon. On the rock walls on both sides, more and more rock ninjas finally poked their heads out, Shurikens, kyune, detonating tags. An overwhelming attack came from a higher ground towards the Konoha ninjas. Even if the ninjas' mobility far exceeded that of ordinary people, facing such an attack from above, even if they really had 3 heads and 6 arms, they couldn't come up with any better solution. Wood style, wood ingot wall. With both hands on the ground, in the blink of an eye, a huge, hard wooden shield appeared above the heads of the Konoha people. The violent explosion that followed further proved the hardness of this shield. As expected of Master Shinaiwang, the Konoha ninjas, who were a little panicked by the sudden attack, finally calmed down, and at the same time, Minato had already given the order. Everyone, break forward. Perhaps Minato, Shinao, and Tsukumo could handle such a battle without a care in the world, but for the average person, it was still too harsh. If they didn't find a way to reverse the situation, I'm afraid all of Konoha would be annihilated here. Although, judging by the current situation, breaking out still carried considerable risk, the enemy had intentionally left a gap, certainly not by accident. But if they remained where they were, dust release, original realm separation jutsu, the massive wooden wall didn't hold for long. Clearly, the Iwagakure also had a cage-level figure unwilling to be left out. Dust release. A terrifying white light swept across the seemingly indestructible wood release in the blink of an eye, and with that flash of white light, the massive shield crumbled. Legend has it that terrifying jutsu that could reduce something to atoms. This wasn't the first time Shinao had seen it, but it was clear that compared to the previous ninjutsu sealing scroll, the energy unleashed by the user's own actions was far more terrifying. The white light, symbolizing destruction, was swift and precise. Anyone caught within it lost all chance of escape. Similar to Amaterasu, this was a terrifying technique that guaranteed death upon contact. Gazing at the small figure suspended in the air, Shinao could barely suppress the urge to turn back and engage. But for the greater good, he was forced to use wood release to create obstacles while swiftly fleeing with the Konoha ninja. 2 libras, Anoki. Remember this, dividing line for perspective shift. Don't underestimate the other side, he continued to command. In the current ninja world, young and outstanding ninjas continue to appear, not to mention the young man in front of him who is known as the second Senju Hashirama, even among the remnants of the Rain Village that the coalition forces of the 3 countries have just wiped out. They have made remarkable discoveries. Although the Rain Village has been controlled by them, the owner of those terrible eyes escaped in that battle. Let's put these aside for now. The biggest reason why Anoki calmly let Konoha break out to the east side of the canyon is not the ones mentioned above. This battle does not belong only to Konoha and Iwagakure. In fact, this war is a joint operation. Young and powerful Konoha twins. This is where you will fall. P.S. The third update. See above. Keep asking for everything. Chapter 170, In the Blood Mist. Damn it, those old devils. Kurizen Kashimaru thrust the sewing needle fiercely into the ground. The slender, needle-like blade was a perfect match for his sharp, piercing voice. If it weren't for the fact that he'd seized the power of the sewing needle, one of the 7 ninja swords by killing his father, anyone would have been tempted to punch that masked face. The one who got killed can only blame their own lack of skill. This even colder voice also came from the owner of one of the 7 swords, the owner of the blunt knife Daoki, Takeo Yaburan. After all, isn't the strongest sage's eye still no match for us? The equally large and terrifying blade, even the Lord of Spray, has the same unruly personality as the blade. Everyone, be quiet. Behind everyone, the man carrying a huge black staff spoke. From the outside, he looks like a child at most, but the long scar under his left eye and his purple eyes are telling of his extraordinariness. That's right, just like that Tsuchika Jinoki who personally supervised a battle, the highest combat power of the Kurigakage village has naturally arrived on the battlefield. The 4th Mizukage, Yagura. 3 of the 7 ninja swordsmen had arrived, and even the Mizukage had come in person. Though the Kurigakure's contingent wasn't numerous, each one was an elite force. Only as an isolated island in the sea could they mobilize in such an all-out force without any danger. Despite this, the battle a few days ago had served as a wake-up call for young Yagura. Though they were only a few young men, the power of the Rinnegan was truly not to be underestimated. Even with 3 cage-level warriors attacking simultaneously, the enemy still escaped. However, this wasn't a major concern. After all, the coalition's goal lay elsewhere. Compared to the still developing 6 Paths, The threat posed by wood release was clearly far more deadly. On this side of the canyon, the shaking of the earth and the accompanying cries of battle were becoming increasingly noticeable. Was they truly breaking out to the east? Yagura stood up, grasping the coral staff behind him. Everyone, prepare for battle. The legendary, most powerful escape technique, let me witness it, the dividing line of the strongest escape technique. He had only one goal, absolutely to annihilate this vanguard of Konoha. Therefore, the closer he got to escaping, the more he had to be on the lookout for their next move. Unfortunately, the enemy, poised for action, had already prepared for it. Boom, a continuous stream of detonating tags exploded. At the end of the passage, countless rubble and debris rained down. This terrifying shattered rock not only inflicted considerable damage on the Konoha ninjas charging in the front, but also completely blocked the immediate escape route. Then, a small figure appeared on top of the rubble. Behind him, more and more shadowy figures appeared one by one. That's the Yonde Mizukage, someone shouted first, and fear spread. Counting that Tsuchikage before him, this was the second Kage to appear. Even if Shinayu and Minato-sama were as powerful as they were, could they truly lead everyone out from between these two Kage? Water style, great waterfall technique. The power of a Kage-level warrior should not be underestimated, let alone within such a confined space. The surging waves were like a mighty river, instantly transforming the canyon into riverbed. This was like a force unto death, making it impossible to muster the desire to resist. Even sporadic fire-style techniques or the stone walls couldn't stop the flood that seemed to be cleansing the world. Is this the end? It's still far from over. Wood-style, tree realm arrives. Thick roots struggled first to break through the ground. And then, in just a few seconds, even more frantic trunks and branches powerfully curled and stretched. Except for the relatively flat ground beneath the Konoha ninja's feet, the entire canyon began its transformation from riverbed to primeval forest. As for the raging floodwaters, the vast chakra instantly became the perfect nutrient for wood-style techniques. The enemy was the infamous blood mist. Since there was no escape, Konoha would certainly not sit idly by and wait for death. A breakthrough, with a long roar, a figure gleaming with silver-white light instantly burst forth from the formation, and his target, undoubtedly, was Yagura, who had just unleashed a powerful ninjutsu. Konoha White Fang. Tsukumo knew only by breaking through the defenses here could Konoha truly regain the initiative. Therefore, even at the very beginning of the battle, White Fang had already used almost all his strength. Slash. A flash of light passed. Such split-second slashes rarely missed, and this time was no exception. Dang, a crashing sound like the collision of metal and stone echoed. But it wasn't the coral stick in Yagura's hand that blocked the attack. Standing before White Fang was another tall and imposing figure. Konoha White Fang, your reputation truly lives up to its reputation, a rough voice like a thunderous roar echoed, and the one who blocked White Fang's slash was none other than him, the Third Hokage, clad in the Thunder God armor, a powerful body. Blocking White Fang's path was Yagura, the Fourth Mizukage, who stood in his way. Hot on his heels is the Third Tsuchikage, the Ninjago Inoki. Now, out of nowhere, the Third Hokage appears, the ninja known for possessing the strongest spear and shield. Z. Is this the end of Konoha? P.S. The plot is reaching its climax. The crisis of extinction is looming. Are you all excited? Well, regarding the Third Hokage, I can't find his name anywhere. I had to make one up based on his son's name. By the way, keep asking for everything. Everyone, please recommend and reward quickly. Chapter 171, Breakout. Dang, a crash resounded like the clash of metal and stone. But it wasn't Yagura's coral staff that blocked the blow. Standing before White Fang was another towering, imposing figure. Konoha White Fang, truly worthy of his reputation. The two sides clashed and parted ways. White Fang rejoined his main force. A rasping roar like thunder echoed, and it was none other than the Third Hokage, clad in the Thunder God armor, a formidable physique. Legend has it that the only man capable of battling the tailed beasts with his bare hands, was also the master of the Cloud Ninja Thunder God armor. In every sense, G stood at the pinnacle of the ninja world. Only such a man could stop Konoha White Fang. Besieged on all sides, Konoha's army faced a true threat of annihilation. This encirclement force, comprised of cages from the three realms of earth, lightning, and water, showed no intention of conceding their fate. At this point, rebuke and abuse were pointless. The three Konoha members had already reached a consensus on this point. Just surrender, Inoki's voice echoed from above. But if that's the case, perhaps you wouldn't be considered a hero, a little brat of Konoha? The timing, the three opposing nations' combined forces. The terrain, the canyon, Konoha's overwhelming disadvantage. The people, the gathering of the three Kage. Perhaps victory was truly impossible? With clenched hands, Shinayu never relaxed his wood release technique. It was Konoha's last hurdle. Minato stood beside him. Until now, the little son hadn't shown any intention of attacking. This was the final deterrent. Previously, Shinayu and Tsukumo's actions had failed to fundamentally reverse the situation. Minato had his last chance. Tens of thousands of ninjas had joined forces in a battle that had lasted until now. Minato's next move would largely determine the outcome of this battle. Silence lingered for a moment, and the nerves of all Konoha ninjas were stretched to the limit. Any slightest hesitation would lead to the collapse of the entire war. So, at this crucial moment of life and death, that man stepped forward. Ninjas are beings who endure in darkness. With a clear, resonant voice, Little Sun was the first to break free from the wood-release defenses. Before him lay an endless horde of enemies. Just now, the long-laid-in ambush of the Cloud Ninjas on the other side had arrived at the battlefield. Without the protection of darkness, we may soon be consumed by the terrifying flames of hell. He raised his special kunai. The surge of power seemed to flow from his hand into every ninja. He couldn't be allowed to continue. Inoki, a veteran of battle, knew his previous strategy to undermine the enemy's fighting spirit had failed. Furthermore, he couldn't allow the enemy to continue acting recklessly like this. A last-ditch battle. Earth release, rock pressure. Huge boulders rose from the rock faces on either side once again. Their immense size, so massive it blotted out the sky, made one shudder just by looking at it. But this wasn't over yet. Earth-style, super-weighted rock technique. The already enormous boulders were further increased in weight, and the rock faces on either side could no longer support them. Boom. A powerful tremor, accompanied by the falling rocks, once again raised a terrifying cloud of dust on the battlefield. Was it resolved? The massive boulders appeared directly above the Konoha army. If they continued to push down at this rate, it would be hard to imagine anyone surviving. But even so, no one in the coalition let their guard down. They were, after all, equally Kage-level masters. While the Tsukumo's combat prowess was indeed astonishing, it was still unimaginable that they would be defeated so easily. Hidden beneath the massive boulders, was a terrifying energy that could almost completely annihilate the Wind Nation. Catcha, the tedious wait didn't last long. Out of nowhere, a tiny crack appeared on the hard stone surface, and a tiny buzzing sound, like a mosquito's, began to rise from the bottom. Catcha! Catcha! More and more rubble began to appear, the ever-expanding cracks like the most terrifying infection. In just a few seconds, the indestructible boulder became riddled with holes. Buzz, and as the cracks multiplied, the increasingly crisp and resonant buzzing sound grew increasingly intense. Finally, a white light shone at the center of the boulder, and in the blink of an eye, the entire boulder shattered. Wind-style, Big Ball Rasengan. Debris flew, and the giant tree towered to the sky. The blond man stood on the highest branch, his arms still raised high. I can't guarantee the safety of each of you, but I swear here, the ground where your bones are buried will be the soil where Minato shed his blood. Chi, sharp wooden sticks suddenly pierced Inoki, who nimbly dodged. But this was far from the end. Because at the top of the wooden strip, an inconspicuous mark has gradually become clearer. Quick! Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Konoha's golden light flashes, Namikaze Minato goes to battle. And almost at the same time, Tsukumo once again finds the Third Hokage. The battle between Shinayu and Yagura never stops. Wood release, all things. Tiny seeds drift behind every Konoha ninja, and the large amount of chakra absorbed through wood release also enters their bodies through this channel. Kill, the breakout battle has officially begun. All Konoha's ninjas charge forward like crazy, knowing that the trees will support them in the battle, and the flashes of light will lead the way. Come on. It's far from time to despair. The war has just begun. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 172, Traces. The Tree Realm has arrived. Although Minato and Inoki didn't have the upper hands in their fight, and Tsukumo and the Third Hokage were evenly matched, Yagura was clearly overwhelmed by Shinayu's wood-release technique. Even with the support of 3 ninja swordsmen, they were unable to halt the advance of the Konoha ninjas. Although Konoha paid a heavy price for their numerical advantage, they ultimately managed to break through. But that was all. One push, another weakened, and finally, a third, a loss. Although Minato had boosted morale during the battle in the canyon, it was a one-time event. After breaking through the Mist Ninja's encirclement, most of Konoha's ninjas had reached their limits, and what was even more terrifying was that these limits weren't just psychological. While Romantic could indeed significantly enhance a ninja's combat capabilities in a very short period of time, especially those who specialized in ninjutsu, this technique also came with serious side effects. After using a large amount of chakra beyond their limits, a ninja would typically experience a period of weakness due to the overuse of their meridians. Without timely healing and recovery, it would be difficult for them to continue fighting. Konoha had already exhausted its last bit of strength in the previous breakout, and now, there was no way to escape the coalition's pursuit. Both Shinayu and Minato had experienced this kind of 1,000-mile battle royal only once before, except this time, they had gone from hunter to prey. A return battle was unrealistic. Konoha's manpower was now reduced to barely half of what it had been at the start, or even less. Under these circumstances, they simply couldn't afford to put up a last-ditch effort. But running away wasn't an option either. Shinayu knew it all too well, the fear of being overtaken by the enemy at any moment, the fear of losing allies every second, could quickly crumble a warrior's spirit. Getting back to Konoha wasn't too far, but it would take at least half a day. In that time, they'd likely be gradually devoured by the enemy. Running all the way down like this isn't an option. Tsukumo was covered in blood, scars from his battles with the Third Hokage, of course, but even more from the enemies he'd slain along the way. I know, Shinayu nodded, though he didn't say it out loud, but in this small group, the final decision always rested with Shinayu. He looked back again. The coalition forces were approaching. The time for a decisive move had come. North. There's a rocky hill about 2 or 3 miles away. Take cover there. The terrain of the rain country offered few hiding places. Shinayu had to find a way to shake off the coalition forces. Only then would they have a chance of escaping the dividing line to the destination. At first, Zenyaoang, who found this place with his perception ability, didn't care. Until he was getting closer and closer to this place, he gradually discovered something. That's right, his memories, those that were already blurred and even had breakpoints. The memory of constantly struggling in the rain country, everything here felt so familiar. Though time had passed, he had rehearsed everything about this place 1,000 times. Indeed, no one knew this place better than he did. Even some of the natives of the rain country might not be as familiar as he was, for this was where he, a wandering poet, had lived for years with Nagato and the others. Go to the top of the mountain, he commanded. If memory served him right, there should be a cave there that led back to the foot of the mountain. Using that, they should be able to evade pursuit. After another round of haste, when everyone finally reached the cave, something unexpected happened. The cave they had imagined existed had vanished without a trace. Has his memory been distorted? In that case, closing his eyes, Shinayu tried his best to sense his surroundings. If the cave entrance had disappeared, then he could simply find a similar passage again. Even if it didn't lead directly to the outside world, a few exits far enough apart would suffice. But as his perception gradually expanded, Zenyaoang discovered something incredible. This hill is no longer what it once was. And within it, an even greater secret is hidden. Chapter 173, Backhand. What is this? Having mastered the Yangdun physique, Zenyaoang's perception abilities have been further enhanced. No movement within a radius of several miles can escape his notice if he so chooses. While this ability isn't permanently active, it's still easily accessible should he so choose. That's why he was so shocked. The interior of this small mountain has been almost completely hollowed out. And what was the purpose of such a massive undertaking? Why would someone go to such great lengths to build something like this in the war-torn rain country? Deepening his perception, a magnificent blueprint gradually came into view for Zenyaoang. This vast hollow wasn't a military settlement, much less a secret base. The sheer effort put into completing this remarkable feat wasn't to start a war, it was simply a refusal to succumb to it. This place had been completely transformed into a town. Streets, alleys, houses, squares, even a school. Clearly, a vast village once existed within the heart of this mountain. Who is it? Why would they live here? If it's just to avoid war, if they have such power, why are they hiding everywhere? I can't understand, who in Rain Village has such power and such faith to do such a thing? No, wait. If that's the case, then it makes perfect sense. The huge village built inside Rain Village, the buried caves, the constant disappearance of the population of Rain Village. Nagato and his 3 companions who haven't been seen for years. Yes, if that's the case, then everything can be explained. Now, there's only one thing that concerns Shinayu, the lingering smell of blood that permeates the cave. For Shinayu, who's used to struggling between blood and fire, this smell is all too familiar. A battle just took place here, a battle that ultimately resulted in the deaths of most people. Nagato, Konan, Yuriko. Everyone, get into the cave. Quick, the pursuers are approaching in a flash. Now is not just the time to worry about those 3 guys, their own situation is already dire. If the interior had been completely hollowed out, perhaps this wouldn't be such a bad thing for Shinayu and his men. As long as they could exploit the relatively complex terrain, their overwhelming advantage in exploration wouldn't be difficult to shake off the enemy. Even if that didn't work, they could still use the terrain to delay them for a longer period. In the current situation, Shinayu had to seize every opportunity to breathe. After all, Konoha's ninja hadn't yet fully recovered their combat capabilities. However, there was only one last problem. Tisk, Shinayu spat harshly. Now he could only hope that the situation wouldn't turn out as badly as he'd imagined, the dividing line of the coalition forces. Of course, it wasn't a matter of accumulated familiarity, but rather the fact that not long ago, the 3 Kingdoms coalition had just conducted an unexpected annihilation campaign here. The passages to the outside world should have been completely destroyed, right? Zed said confidently. Don't worry, I arranged for the Iwagakure to handle this that very day. Anoki pointed to the only passage before him. Aside from this main passage, of course, P.S. I've almost forgotten how many updates this is. Anyway, everyone, please keep up the good work. Recommendation votes go up. Rewards go up. Chapter 174, Darkness. Hurry up, Tishao shouted loudly. As Shinayu's guard, he, like Zhuming and Wuking, they only pursued Shinayu, the head of the route, and acted as the most effective tool to complete any task he gave them. The order had been given. They were to guide everyone into the cave for shelter as quickly as possible. Beyond that, they also performed the crucial task of defense. After all, after the sudden and repeated battles, everyone was exhausted. The route existed precisely because at times like these, someone was needed to carry out Shinayu's orders. What's the situation? Not good, Zhuming shook his head. Although not a perceptive ninja, he was known for his speed, so he was responsible for observing the entire team from front to back. While successfully breaking through the encirclement was a blessing, it seemed to have exhausted the Konoha ninja's energy. Now they were not just exhausted from chakra, but more of a psychological exhaustion. Most people have reached their limit, and that's not all. Zhuming shook his head helplessly. In order to ensure concealment, the team's advancement is very slow, and the structure of the cave is relatively complex. Wuking is under a lot of pressure, although Zhenayong himself was mostly responsible for perception and guidance in previous missions. Wuking, as an illusion-type ninja, did have his own set of perception skills because of his innate strong mental power. But this time the perception range that needs to be maintained is indeed larger, and on top of that, the ninjas responsible for perception are invisibly responsible for the life and death of the entire team. In the initial battle, the perception-type ninjas who were under layers of protection had been slaughtered by the other side. In the current ninja army, the remaining perception-type ninjas are already very limited, not to mention that most of them are in poor condition and unable to maintain normal work. And God seems to think that he has given Konoha too much luck. Until today, he has no intention of giving any more luck to the Konoha ninjas. It seems that due to some geological reasons, the front part of the cave collapsed. The ninjas who were already struggling to move forward encountered even greater trouble. Lord Zhenayong, the road is completely blocked, can't a rubble be cleared away? Zhenayong's brows were frowned more and more tightly. He always had a bad premonition, so he had to get out of danger as soon as possible. I've already assigned people to work on it, but because it's inside the cave, clearing it could easily cause a secondary collapse, so progress is slow. A moment of silence. Where exactly is it? While top-tier warriors like Shinayu, Minato, and Tsukumo should rest well and conserve their strength for the upcoming battle. Given the current situation, if the road isn't cleared quickly, once the coalition forces locate them, Konoha will have no chance of victory. But Shinayu-sama, it's okay. With me here, it should be cleared quickly. He stood up and exchanged a glance with Minato, who nodded in understanding. While Shinayu was away from the central army, Minato would handle everything on his behalf. Let's go. Darkness has always been the best friend of conspiracy and death. If you ask why, it's probably because humans have an instinctive aversion to darkness, and the fear that comes with it. No matter what the emotion, as long as it wavers for a moment, it will inevitably affect a person's judgment, and this decisiveness, in turn, greatly influences the ultimate development of things. Therefore, most people dislike darkness, unless they themselves are the monster hidden in the inky darkness. What a funny irony. Only by standing in the opposite position, allowing themselves to be completely enveloped by darkness, can humans temporarily escape their fear of darkness itself. It's truly contradictory and foolish. However, regardless of the situation, since war itself is not for a purpose more noble than fear, then the use of despicable darkness is naturally understandable. Unlike the exhausted and depleted Konoha, the long-prepared coalition forces have ambushed here. During the war, thanks to the Prophet's intelligence, they have an absolute advantage, and in this vast cave, this advantage will be infinitely amplified. At this end of the narrow passage, countless pairs of murderous eyes waited silently, waiting for the opponent to fall into this long-laid trap. Darkness will be their final mourner. The ruthless inky color will give everyone an equal death, whether ordinary ninja, or Konoha's shining. P.S. Please do everything. Chapter 175, Despair. The situation was worse than expected. Perhaps due to the previous battle, the already fragile cave had already suffered complex collapses. Even with Shinayu's personal presence, using his powerful perception and wood release to force his way forward, it still took a lot of effort. And there were more than one such collapse? The march was further slowed down. Was it because too many people entered the cave that caused the collapse? Shinayu shook his head helplessly. This was the first time he had experienced such a complicated battle, hiding here and there was no solution at all. As the leader, he had to find a way to solve the current predicament immediately. No matter how powerful the enemy was, he had a responsibility to lead these guys back to Konoha. If you ask why, this operation was his own initiative. Because of his persistence, the lives of Minato, Tsukumo-sensei, and hundreds of ninjas were all involved in this gamble. So he couldn't lose. If he lost, he would lose everything. Lord Shinaiwang. We have entered the mountain. The narrow passage finally reached the end, and looking up, the appearance of the entire town has gradually become clear in the darkness. This place was indeed a refuge that was once prosperous, and the strong smell of blood in the air was also telling others what kind of cruel massacre it had experienced not long ago. Most places are still intact, and traces of battle are mainly concentrated in the square in the center of the town. Has any resistance been organized there? No, probably just to cover the retreat of most people. Judging from the scattered footsteps and the surrounding wreckage, most of them should be ordinary civilians without combat capabilities, and the number of ninjas is extremely limited, but what is worrying is that if this inference is correct, there is probably one or several very powerful ninjas stationed here. After all, to be able to destroy the entire square to this extent, this power is definitely not to be underestimated. If you think about it carefully, after Hanzo's death, there are probably only a few ninjas in the entire Rain Country who meet these conditions. Yes, this is probably the shelter built by Yohiko and his men. But for some reason, and at some point, a tragic battle took place here. Those little brats, are they okay? Zenaion sighed deeply. Now, he probably didn't have time to worry about others. Keep going. Find the exit here as soon as possible. Yes. In the darkness, the passage of time gradually became unclear, until in the end, even Zenaion couldn't be sure how much time had passed. They could only speed up their exploration, while cautiously guarding against the threats from behind. And this torment finally came to an end before everyone was almost numb. The wind. Unlike the polluted air in the cave, it was clearly coming from the outside world, and it brought the unique moisture of the Rain Country, which was refreshing. For the ninjas who excelled in surviving harsh environments, this was a clear clue. The exit. There it is. And so, without anyone's urging, their once exhausted bodies squeezed the strength to move from every cell. The ninjas accelerated through every corner, eager to see the light from the outside world around the next corner. Yes, they were about to reach the exit and return home, but at this final moment, that ominous premonition grew stronger. Release his senses. Shinayu, who had also been marching at a rapid pace, suddenly stopped. His powerful perception even allowed him to see the exit clearly half a step ahead of the leading ninja. "Be careful," he shouted. But he was still a step too late. Dust release, original world separation technique. White light. It was indeed a strong ray of light. But unlike the light of hope the Konoha ninjas prayed for, that white light symbolized destruction and death. The latecomers had no time to stop, and the first ones were completely enveloped in the magnificent light. They died without even a whimper. It was a trap. Yes, although Shinayu had a premonition from the beginning, things had actually unfolded as he had predicted. It was no one else who had destroyed this shelter, and apart from the ninja coalition formed by the three countries, no one could defeat Nagato, who possessed the Rinnegan. Whoosh, a gust of wind swept past. Two figures, similarly gleaming with lightning, joined the fray. Not only the Third Hokage, G, but this time, even Ai, the heir to the throne, joined the fray. The radiance of the Thunder God's armor shone. With their incredible speed, a few encounters reduced the surviving Konoha ninjas to a bloody mess. Teacher Minato, Shinayu quickly formed hand seals, and the power of wood release resurfaced. At his call, Minato and Tsukumo approached the two Kumo ninjas, freely moving among the crowd. Earth release, return of the earth and land. The earth cracked. Suddenly, yellow earth appeared, burying the trees. Amidst this whirling dust, Inoki finally joined the fray. Kill, a childish, short voice echoed from behind. The Mizukage, Yagura, who had been tailing Konoha ninjas, had finally arrived on the battlefield. The powerful Sninka couldn't suppress their bloodlust. No way to heaven, no door to earth. Could this be the day that the era of Konoha truly came to an end? Great despair began to descend upon the hearts of the people. The disappearance of the desire to fight would lead to faster destruction, so, in this chaotic moment, the ninja squatted down. His palms once again pressed against the uneasy ground. This was already the last trump card, and after revealing it, it would be the moment to decide life and death. Forbidden Ninja Technique Immortal Reincarnation, P.S. You know. I'm asking for everything. The Last Half Day. Chapter 176, Thousands of Hands. So, in this chaotic moment, the ninja crouched down, his palms once again pressing against the uneasy ground. This was his final trump card, and once it was revealed, it would be a matter of life and death. Forbidden Ninja Technique, Impure World Reincarnation. A massive coffin appeared out of thin air beside Shinayu, and as the lid dropped, a familiar figure emerged from within. That's, to Inoki, that figure was all too familiar. After all, no matter what war it was, any conflict with Konoha would inevitably take place in the Land of Rain. For this perpetually weeping nation, that man was perhaps the sole, final pillar of support. Although I'd heard rumors a while ago, I certainly didn't see him when I came to the Land of Rain this time. Inoki clenched his fists. Even with his dust release, he couldn't underestimate this ninja. After all, in his time, he was a powerful ninja known as a demigod. Everyone be careful. Stay away from that ninja, he shouted loudly, and then rushed straight towards the other party. This guy can only be dealt with by himself, the only one with combat experience. Leave him to me. You guys deal with the other ninjas of Konoha as soon as possible. At this point in the war, there is absolutely no way out for both sides. Too many strong people gathered in a small area. In this way, whoever loses in this war, no, even just retreating will bring devastating consequences. This is a situation where no one can retreat. Killing aura. Killing intention. Blood. All descriptions of the brutality of the battlefield are perfectly adequate here. The gradually crimson backgrounds, the gradually spreading sounds of slashing and chopping. Water style, water dragon bullet jutsu, tisk. If he'd been dealing with Yagura alone, Shinayu would never have been in such a passive position. Most of his ninjutsu, especially the fluid-based water style, would have put Yagura at a complete disadvantage against Shinayu's wood style. But right now, in addition to dealing with Yagura, Shinayu also had the responsibility of protecting a large force. In fact, if Shinayu hadn't been engaging the enemy while simultaneously using wood style to shield them, the remaining ninjas of Konoha would have collapsed long ago. But even so, Shinayu was already reaching his limit. A prolonged battle, and facing a cage-level powerhouse and the simultaneous attacks of 3 ninja swordsmen. No, not only that, among Konoha's 3 cage-level ninjas, he could be considered the one being given special treatment. The current ninja world could no longer tolerate the rise of another Senju Hashirama. So, almost all the elites of the 3 Kingdoms Alliance had their sights set on Shinayu. The ninja world, the entire world needs Senju Shinayu to die here. And the more this happens, the more everyone realizes Shinayu's terrifying power, the terrifying power of wood release. Even amidst this encirclement, the young man known as Senju Shinayu remains like a boulder in the middle of a mighty river. No matter how turbulent the waves, that man will never retreat. No, rather, if we ignore the other Konoha ninjas, once the war descends into this endless stalemate, the tide will gradually turn in Konoha's favor. You know, thanks to wood release, Shinayu's endurance has reached a terrifying level, and this combat power will drag this battle into an unpredictable future. Clearly, the besieging coalition forces are well aware of this. Therefore, the powerful warriors from all sides must display their unique abilities. Hell Thrust. One Punch Hand. The Thunder God armor is already maintaining its maximum power. Having trapped Tsukumo in his tracks with only his strongest shield, the Third Hokage finally intends to unleash his long-hidden, mighty spear. Far exceeding the speed of lightning, it charged towards Tsukumo in the blink of an eye, and the latter, of course, would not sit still and wait for death. 8 Gates of Ninjutsu. Duman, open. The 2 ninjas, equally determined by their speed, began their desperate duel at a speed unmatched by ordinary humans. Meanwhile, while Minato's battle was much smoother than Tsukumo's, it was clear that he couldn't quickly defeat AI, whose defense was equally astounding. However, the biggest problem lay with Shinayu. Yagura had clearly realized that if they continued to clash like this, the confined space would only minimize their group advantage. They couldn't delay any longer. If this were to happen, red chakra began to swirl around his body. Unlike Garuda's translucent armor, Yagura, as the Mizukage, was clearly more proficient in the chakra armor of the tailed beasts. 3 scarlet tails extended from his back, and from there, his attack method completely changed. No longer using ninjutsu, this time, he engaged in close-range attacks directly with his chakra cloak. It's not just the destructive power. Even the speed is completely on a different level than before. So, inherent time control? No. No. If I dodge here. The biggest problem is still the Konoha ninjas. If I dodge here, I'll let Yagura, who is beginning to transform into a tailed beast, enter the camp. No, I can't do this. If that's the case. If inherent time control doesn't work, then this is the only way. Strange runes crept onto his brow again. Not only that, compared to before, after sealing the monster into his body, the energy that was already difficult to control has become even more difficult to master. Sage Mode. On. Sage Technique, True Thousand Hands. The third shot. Keep up the good work. Everyone. Chapter 177, Martial Arts from All Directions. It was a flash of white light. For Shinayu, no, for all the ninjas of Konoha, that white light would probably be familiar to them. It was Konoha's pride, and also its sharpest fang. Why? Shinayu's world began to slowly darken. The attack he was caught off guard against left him with no chance to struggle, and he slowly collapsed. Why? He could no longer ask, as all his feelings were fading away. He was already struggling to the limit, and had long since lost his last bit of strength, but he still reached out to the white light, towards the man's cold profile. Why? Until the very end, he did not answer, the dividing line of a deadly battle, Sage Mode. On. Sage Technique, True Thousand Hands. Those deep purple, intricately woven runes once again obscured Hanayon's original features. For those struggling on the battlefield, this was an absolutely unfamiliar power. No one standing opposite Hanayon had ever been able to describe the full extent of this move, because if it was used, Hanayon would almost always win by an overwhelming margin. Boom! The majestic image of the Dharma once again shattered the ground. Beneath this sunless cavern, one couldn't imagine how such a massive tree could appear out of nowhere, as if it had taken root here thousands of years ago. The towering, godlike tree soared skyward, piercing the rock face with almost no resistance. A faint chant of Buddhist scriptures appeared out of nowhere. Everything was just like the killing of Hanzo. No, there was a subtle difference. The colossal statue that abruptly divided the battlefield was no longer the compassionate, karma-relinquishing Buddha. This time, The wrathful eight-armed Vajra appeared before the crowd. Killing to protect life, severing karma, not killing people, please don't complain. Before that massive image, all attacks seemed insignificant, even insignificant. And for the user, Zenaion could feel the immense power churning within him, and even more deeply, the enormity and turmoil of this divine power. A more terrifying, cracking sensation than the last full-strength attack washed over him. It felt as if he would explode if he let out a single breath. No more delay. Shinayu couldn't sustain this state for long. All he could do was end this battle as quickly as possible. First up was Yagura. Now cloaked in chakra, he posed the greatest threat to ordinary ninjas. As he gradually lost his mind, his destructive power would likely only increase. He couldn't let him run amok. He clenched his hands tightly, unleashing his attacks in a split second. While his opponent was agile, that didn't mean Shinayu was helpless. Immortal technique, all bandits technique. A powerful tremor erupted in the already dark cave, making it impossible for anyone to maintain their footing. Before anyone could even gain a firm foothold, massive hands suddenly appeared from the ground. Those giant hands, several meters, even dozens of meters tall, were swift and incredibly strong. From the moment they broke through the earth, those terrifying hands crushed any enemy who dared to challenge their majesty, and Yagura received special attention. Several massive hands clawed at him from different directions, as if the entire world was about to fall upon him. Boom, 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 boom. The terrifying sorcerer temporarily halted the coalition's onslaught. No, now they could only desperately dodge Shinayu's attacks. This terrifying scene was so terrifying that even Inoki and Ji were helpless. This was the power of the gods. But that wasn't the end. Time in Sage Mode was running out. You must know that once Sage Mode ended, Shinayu's combat effectiveness would be reduced to zero for a long time. Simply severely injuring Yagura wasn't enough. If he wanted to escape, he needed to inflict even greater damage. So, how about this move? Sage Technique, 8 Directions Shocking Martial Arts. The world darkened, not visually, but with a tremor deep within the soul. Everyone's attention was drawn to the man behind him. The giant raised his arm slightly, and then, in an instant, the earth shook. It was riot. It was violence. The enraged King Kong brandished his magical weapon, attacking recklessly, as if to sweep away all the filth of this world. For the first time, the coalition felt lost about this action. Was the decision to besiege Konoha truly the right one? Behold the scene before us, only surviving legends. Could humanity truly withstand this? The terrifying Dharmadhata roared to the heavens, and just before the coalition's collapse, an even denser swath of wood descended from the sky, enveloping the entire Konoha regiment, and then, silence. P.S. Fourth update. Recommend and reward quickly. This week is almost over. The academic master ascends next week. This is his last chance. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.